Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, October 9th, 2023 meeting of the Garrett Park Town Council. Time is 7:33. Before we begin, I have to do well, this is the beginning, I guess, statement for the record on the closed meeting that we had last month. On September 19th, 2023, the mayor and town council met in open session. Present were Mayor Welch and council members Jerry Lee Bennett, Todd Eisenstadt, Lisa Max, Phil Schulp, and Stephen Paskowski. Town manager Barb Matthews and assistant town manager Caleb Bucher were also in attendance. At 8:54 p.m., Councilmember Schulp moved to go into closed session pursuant to Maryland Code General Provisions Article Section 3-305B1 to discuss a personnel matter involving a specific employee. Councilmember Eisenstadt seconded the motion, which was approved unanimously. The closed meeting adjourned at 10:02 p.m. You have before you the agenda, which we have a new one that included, made sure that we have council member Kate Stewart on here. Are there any other changes that we need to make? Not hearing any. Soon we'll consider that just fine. Council member Stewart, please come on up. And just so you know, we all had we had a dinner and a nice conversation with Councilmember Stewart this evening. And welcome you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mayor Welch. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for hosting us this evening. I'm glad we were able to have the conversation. I've enjoyed working with all of you on the town council and look forward to continuing that in the coming months and years. But today we bring a proclamation celebrating Garrett Park's 125th anniversary. So we have one nice one framed and one for each of you. And if it's okay with you, I can read it aloud and present it to you. So this is the Montgomery County Council proclamation. Whereas in April 1898, the Maryland legislature incorporated the town of Garrett Park, giving it full authority to hold its own elections, craft and pass ordinances, and oversee its own operations. And whereas on May 2nd, 1898, the town of Garrett Park held its first election, marking the beginning of the sovereignty of this town. And whereas Garrett Park is home to many notable activists, scholars, and activists of the 20th century, including Jessie Ross Thompson, a suffragette and creator of the still active women's club, Charles Moments. Still active women's club. This font is very small on this. Charles Mommsen, Vice Admiral in the U.S. Navy and inventor of two life-saving tools used to rescue survivors of the USS Squalus submarine accident in 1939. And Donald McLaughlin, architect and graphic designer who designed the emblem for the 1945 United Nations Conference on International Organization, which served as a prototype for the current UN emblem. And whereas the residents of Garrett Park have a demonstrated history of engaging in the democratic process, using their municipal authority to vote on a referendum which designated the town as a nuclear-free zone in 1982, one of the first such zones in the United States. And whereas the Garrett Park Citizens Association continuously supports town residents by providing forums for public discussion and organizing townwide events. And whereas the town has sustained significant growth, increasing from a population of just 175 people and 30 buildings in 1900 to now supporting about 1,000 residents and over 300 homes. And whereas today Garrett Park is home to an eclectic mix of architects, artists, writers, lawyers, business owners, healthcare professionals, and government officials who continuously engage in their town council and community groups to make their town a beautiful and welcoming place to live. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland, hereby recognizes this year, 2023, as Garrett Park's 125th anniversary. So thank you very much for having me this evening, and I will present.
Oh, it's my turn again. Let's see, the time is 7:39, and you have in front of you, council members, our minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes to look at. One is from September 2023. It's the regular town council minutes. Are there any changes to those?
No changes.
None.
No changes? Okay. All those in favor of approving the September 11th council minutes?
Aye.
All right, great. Thank you very much. We also have the minutes of the September 19th, 2023 special council meeting. This was the town hall where we heard from residents. Any changes or corrections to those minutes? No? Those in favor of
No.
approval?
Aye.
And then also, I don't have it in front of me, the minutes from the September 19th closed meeting. I don't have those.
That was virtual only.
Or that was the closed meeting.
Those are not printed in.
They're not printed. Okay,
Yeah.
so we have, oh.
Yep.
Gotcha. So those are, okay, next item on our agenda is presentations by residents.
I think we still have to.
You have to approve them. You do have to approve them.
Did it virtually. I'm sorry.
All right.
Thank you, Shirley.
All those in favor of approving the closed meeting minutes?
Aye.
All right, that's 4, and Lisa raised her hand. Okay. So now we can move on to presentations by residents. Anyone in person who wants to participate? Or anyone on Zoom that wants to make presentations? No? Okay, great. Keep on going. Manager Matthews, it's time for your report.
Actually, I think Chris Keller has his hand up to speak.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Chris. Please. We welcome your participation. Your name and address, please.
Chris Keller, 4501 Claremont Place. Does the reallocation of ARPA funds scheduled for later this evening require an ordinance to amend the budget?
So we will be doing that tonight. We are just going to talk about it conceptually, and then it will be included in the mid-year budget ordinance.
Okay, so you would take it up next month?
Barb, what's the timeline for doing the mid-year?
Normally we introduce in December and adopt in January. Certainly, I think if you all wanted to make adjustments before then, we could do it earlier, but by the time we get there, we're almost back to our normal schedule anyway.
Well, I might suggest that you take it up with the FY 25 budget, the work for which you would begin in February, March of next year. That seems to be adequate timing in order to meet the ARPA deadline of December, rather than making extra work at this time. And also, reallocating will, of course, remove some of the incentive that has recently, I think, produced some good momentum toward actually finalizing consideration of town hall, which has been languishing a long time. And I hate to lose that momentum, some of which has been, I think, attributable to the fact that you, under current circumstances, have a December 25 deadline. So I would urge you to just take it up in the FY 25 deliberations, which will, certainly the prep will start in a matter of months, and your deliberations will probably take place next February and March.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments by residents? Okay, not seeing any hands raised, right, Barb?
No.
All right, so your manager's report, please.
Thank you. Included in your agenda packet is the financial report for the month of September. As I noted, there wasn't anything particularly noteworthy in terms of financial activity last month. Also wanted to share that the camera installation at Penn Place project is now complete, and want to thank Kayla for all her work on this project. Town office renovation is moving along. We've had some back and forth with the Lumber and Light regarding the proposal for construction services, as well as some other matters. We've got a few furnishing items that we're attempting to finalize with Lumber and Light. And lastly, Kayla and I are working on our continued review of the materials we have on site to determine, what needs to be kept, what might need to be moved off site, since we will need to be operational during the renovation.
So can we get an update, like what's the thinking that the thinking about when this will happen?
It depends. So we got a proposal for construction services. We had some questions about that after George Miller reviewed it. I received the revised proposal today. Just given the dollar amount involved, we are getting another proposal for construction services, just so there's something to compare it to. And that I had some back and forth with the alternative contractor last week while I was out of town. I don't know when I'll be receiving that. There will be we believe there will be some minor permitting required through the county due to the plumbing and electrical work involved. But the first step would obviously be for you all to approve the construction contract, which will be in excess of, probably $45,000. So I assume you would like that to come back before you for formal approval.
Yes.
So assuming there's no special meeting, then that wouldn't take place until November.
Will there be any impact on Black Market's operations?
For the office renovation, no. There's some minor work being done in the lobby. Obviously, they access their pantry, but no.
Is that office renovation going to be linked to the broader renovations we talked about last time in place? I mean, is it?
Right. That is one and the same. Nope.
All right, so we know the budget.
Right. Any other questions before I move on?
Have we installed any signage to make sure that people are aware of the new cameras? And also, could we maybe put some messaging out on the listserv? Because I think they're meant to be there as a deterrent, right?
Right.
So it's important that people know the cameras are there.
We don't have any signage up now. We can look at how to do that discreetly, so it's still, attractive. But
Right.
we can certainly put something out on the listserv that there are cameras that are now operational.
Thank you. Thank you for the work to get those installed.
Also want to give an update on the 11321 Kenilworth, which is the former Yendel property. At your last meeting, you approved contract change order number 1. Following execution of that change order, Remac USA, who is the demolition contractor, re-engaged its plumber, who did successfully cap the water and sewer lines at the property, and that work was inspected and accepted by WSSC. This was a requirement before they could file for their demolition permit through the Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services. And before anyone gets too excited, there is a slight hiccup here. I am pleased to tell you that the county actually did rush through the demolition permit application. And as of this morning, I have a copy of the approved demolition permit application. I did want to mention, which is also noted in the memo, as you all recall, last year, that August of 2022, roughly, I applied for and we received a grant through the Maryland Department of Natural Resources for the development of the park on the property. Part of the state process, anytime a state agency, provides a grant, they run it through what is known as a state clearinghouse. So this is an opportunity for other state agencies to review the approved project and to provide any comments. So for example, the Maryland Department of the Environment provided comments just about the disposal of the asbestos, materials on the property. One of the other agencies that did provide comments was the Maryland Historic Trust. The Maryland Historic Trust, in their review letter, stated that the demolition of the house and the garage, in their opinion, constitutes an adverse effect on the historic properties through the physical removal of the contributing resource of the house and the garage. They certainly understand that there is a conservation easement on the property and that the property can only be used for a park. So they are not objecting, thankfully, to the demolition of the house itself. But because of what they have deemed to be an adverse impact on the Garrett Park Historic District, the Maryland Historic Trust is requiring the town to take certain measures to mitigate those adverse impacts. They're very minor in nature. There's only two of them. One is photographic documentation of the house and the property to provide an accurate record of the resource and its setting. We've already gone ahead and taken all the photos. There is a very specific kind of archival process that we have to go through, and Kayla thankfully offered to help with that. And then the second measure is to develop a public history project that focus on the contributions of women in the conservation history of Garrett Park. They did not specify the specific format that second item has to take. It could be something, some kind of marker at the property itself. It could be some kind of publicly circulated brochure, film, webpage on our site. Some of you may recall, I think it happened right about the time I joined the town staff on an interim basis, is that our town archivist had actually done an exhibit on the contributions of women in Garrett Park. So I'm hoping we can kind of leverage that. These mitigation measures do not have to be completed, before the house can be torn down, but there is some back and forth currently between the Maryland Historic Trust and the Department of Natural Resources about the form and the degree of formality that these mitigation measures need to be in. But it is likely at this stage that there will be a third-party memorandum of agreement between Maryland Historic Trust, the Department of Natural Resources, and the town. The agreement is currently in review at DNR. I think they would like something a little less formal than an actual memorandum of agreement. What I would like to receive from you this evening is if it does take the form of a memorandum of agreement, that is an intergovernmental agreement that would be executed by the mayor. As I stated, I already have a draft. It is the two measures I mentioned, the kind of the photographic inventory, as well as some type of, display, interpretive panel documenting the contributions of women in the town's history. So if the town council is so inclined, I would appreciate you all giving authority this evening for the mayor to sign that, so that as soon as it is released by DNR's legal counsel, that if it is something more than a letter, that the mayor would have your approval to sign the memorandum of agreement. That would just help move things along.
Thumbs up for that, for allowing me to sign
Yes.
that. A thumbs up
Okay.
for this also.
And then thank you all.
Question, did you say that the pictures are done already?
Yeah, I actually, George, and as soon as I realized that this was happening, basically George and Frank went ahead and took in brought in some artificial lighting, basically since the house is boarded up. And basically what we were required to do is to take pictures of every interior space. And there were very specific requirements in terms of the exterior views that are required. But yeah, they brought in a lighting system and just moved it from room to room and floor to floor. So thank goodness for George and Frank. The last step before the house can come down is that we need the State Board of Public Works to essentially approve the project. So the significance of this issue that came up through the Maryland Historic Trust is that all has to be resolved at the interagency level and with the town before the Board of Public Works can take this up. So REMAC is aware of this. I think they were so excited to get the demolition permit. I had been in discussion with a different staff member and reminded them this morning that no, they can't be on site on Friday and taking the house down until we get this signed. Not included in my report, but just some other information. At your last meeting, you approved, you awarded a contract to Earn Contractors Inc. for the exterior painting of Penn Place. They are expected to be on site tomorrow to start basically washing the building and prepping it. So they should be starting painting work very soon. So I have notified Black Market and the guys have notified the postal staff. Other than that, our maintenance team is busy as always, with mowing and weeding and now gearing up for our fall tree planting. Kayla may have to help me if she recalls. I believe the trees are being delivered not this week, but next week. Does that sound right? So they'll be undertaking the planting of those trees. Our maintenance supervisor, George Miller, has been assisting us with a variety of projects, including the installation of the cameras at Penn Place, doing some prep work, as I mentioned, for the eventual demolition of the Yendel home. He's been working on replacement of the entry door at the post office and also helping me with the purchase of some replacement street light poles on Strathmore that you all approved last week. So that order has been placed. I don't have an exact delivery date on those, but I'll let you know when they'll be going in. And
Oh, I wanted a quick question as I
Sure.
was thinking of it, that popped in my mind. Can we use state highway user funds for that?
you might be able to, yeah, because they can generally be used for lighting. I'll double check that, but that is my recollection. So we might be able to use those.
That would be good.
I backtrack one too. I meant to ask, can I get a copy of what MHT's opinion was on adverse effect?
Sure. Yeah, I'll email that out
Was
to
it
y'all.
long or was it just a sentence or something?
It's basically, no, it's not long at all. It's maybe a page and a half letter. But say I'll just email it out to all of you.
It's like a stretch. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they say.
Yeah, it seemed especially as a stretch because I was asking them to hurry up and finish their review, and I sent them a picture of the tree limb that had fallen through and pierced the roof. So it's a little hard to see how removing a house that has a big hole in its roof is somehow adverse, but they have deemed that it is. So
Curious how they justified it. Thank you.
yeah. Okay, thank you all.
The time is 7:54, and we're moving on to authorization of a pickup truck.
Thank you. Some of you may remember this from the discussion during the budget process for FY 2024. We are seeking your authorization this evening to purchase a replacement pickup truck. The truck that is being replaced is a 2010 model that has some evident signs of its long wear and tear history, including rust on the chassis. The maintenance team has reported that the truck is having increasingly frequent mechanical issues. They are requesting the purchase of a 2023 model F-350 Ford pickup truck. We did identify a Baltimore County contract that we can piggyback on. The truck is proposed to be purchased from Apple Ford Lincoln, as I mentioned, under Baltimore County contract pricing. The cost of the truck is $50,145.64. Purchased separately from the truck would be the additional cost of approximately $5,000 for the purchase of a new plow. There is sufficient funding for the purchase of the truck and plow in the capital budget. The unexpended balance in account 25.0, which is our equipment account, is $73,281. As we always do with surplus equipment, we would list the 2010 pickup truck for sale on a government surplus auction site. So we are seeking your approval this evening for the purchase of the truck from Apple Lincoln Ford.
I have 2 questions for that.
Mhm.
Was there any research into whether there's an electric or hybrid option?
I did. That was actually something I specifically discussed with George Miller. All electric isn't really a feasible option. This is one of our workhorse trucks for plowing activities. So if we get another snowmageddon or something similar, we really can't afford to take the truck out of service. George and I also talked about a hybrid vehicle. His assessment is that while the technology is advancing, he doesn't think it's quite there for this type of heavy activity and plowing. Phil is nodding his head.
Oh, yeah.
We certainly do look for opportunities where we can, purchase more environmentally sensitive equipment. I think just due to the nature of this truck and the work that it's expected to perform, the technology just isn't there quite yet.
And my other question is, we're going to list the truck for sale on the surplus site.
Yes,
Are we also listing the plow?
yes, we would.
A follow-up on that
Mhm.
question. I seem to remember the last equipment we sold, we were a little bit pleasantly surprised. Do you remember how much we got back on our return for selling that piece of equipment? Just
Yeah.
for the record, I think. it's
Yeah, I
fair.
believe it was don't quote me on this, but it was roughly about $18,000. And the people who bought it actually were based in Indiana. We actually got bids from as far away as like the Boston area. So this was a time when certainly equipment, supply chain issues were a problem. But George seems reasonably confident that we might be able to get, close to $10,000 for the truck and the plow.
Okay,
So we'll
thank you.
see.
Couple of questions. First is, would it be worth looking at trading it in? Or doesn't that work with these?
I can ask George if he pursued that. We've had pretty good luck, as Jerry Lee was noting, on the auction site. It actually seems to be a little bit more competitive,
Okay.
but I can ask him if he discussed that with Apple Lincoln Ford.
And the second one was, does this one have the dump body, or are we gonna get?
It won't. Actually, what George has indicated is he didn't really feel like we had much need for a dump body.
Do we still have one with a dump body?
I'm trying to remember.
I mean, I think we've got one now, but but we're gonna replace the one with the dump body.
Yes.
But I guess my question would be, if they're chipping and they have to unload all that stuff, does that mean you have to shovel it out by hand?
I can't really speak, Phil, to how they do it operationally, but I trust George and Frank to know what's going to work best for them.
Okay.
But I do remember George making a comment about the dump body was just not something that was that needed. And he thought it was probably money that wasn't well spent at the time.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, can we motion for this or just thumbs up?
Move that we authorize the purchase of the 2023 Model X Ford pickup truck. South by the.
Yes. Second?
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Hands up from Lisa, so we've got.
Hey, Lisa.
Did you have a question, Lisa, or you're just approving?
No,
Okay,
she was
just
just-
approving, okay. Great. We are gonna keep plugging along. The time is 8 o'clock and we're moving on to discussion of town hall. And I think probably the best place to start will be with Assistant Town Manager Kayla Bucher, talking about the survey.
While Town Manager Matthews hopefully is pulling up the presentation so we can do a high level look at the responses, I do want to take a moment to thank everyone who engaged with that survey. When we finally closed it, we had 163 responses, as you'll see noted on the presentation. While most folks submitted their responses as individuals, there were a few folks who chose to submit their responses as a household. We're not particular how you choose to use the survey. We're just excited that you chimed in and shared your thoughts. I will also say, as a general note about the structure of the survey, the only two questions that required responses were your name and your address, just so we could verify that all responses were coming from Garrett Park residents. For the most part, everyone abided with that. We did have one response where the name was submitted as "Who cares?" And I believe that individual claimed to be somewhere on Rokeby, but they did not give us a street address. So that response was removed from the data set because, well, you got to give us their name to play. If you just start at the beginning. Bless you. And if you couldn't already tell that fall was in the air, the sniffles and sneezes have started. Everyone, please take care of your health. And we have our presentation up. For those of you who are here with us in person, feel free to move around. Barb, if you could hit our next slide.
Should we turn the screen maybe?
I'm a little hesitant to move the equipment just because we've had such good luck so far with the audio, and
But
I'm
if
a
they
little-
want to move their chair, they could, right?
if they wanted to move their chair, if you guys wanted to shift up or make yourself comfortable. Town Manager Matthews wants me to move quickly through this presentation, so we are doing about 3 slides at a shot. I'm not sure I'm caffeinated enough to do that, but we're going to try. Some broad responses, as we've already touched about, how we got responses, the fact that only your name and address were required. We are not publicizing your name and your address. Again, it was just a verification tool to make sure it was Garrett Park residents weighing in on Garrett Park Town Hall. We had actually a pretty good response rate for our open-ended additional comments. That saw about 50% of respondents offer comments. Those ranged from simple sentence fragments to some folks who you'll see in the attachment that has all the collected comments, really robust, in-depth commentary. I did read through those comments to try and isolate some broad themes as well as specific details, but I do encourage everyone who's interested in this project to read through and see what your neighbors have said. A lot of time went into sharing particular feedback. Barb, I'll ask you to move to the next. So apparently the price of good audio tonight is that we are having other technical difficulties. So thank you all for your patience. So we did have a couple of broad level questions looking at how people currently use town hall and what their current views of it are. You can see that we do have a decent number of folks who have indicated that town hall currently has what they need in a rental space, whether that be a rental for a party, a memorial, a 50th wedding anniversary, what have you. About 3/4 of people, if I can read the screen correctly, do indicate the current layout works for them. Currently, most folks are generally in agreement that the current town hall rental fees, which, as a reminder, they are $125 per day for a private resident event, $300 if you are in Garrett Park Estates or White Flint, and $600 if you reside elsewhere. And again, those are daily fees. Those are not hourly. It's the same fee whether you are here for 1 hour or you set up shop on a Saturday from 8 a.m. until closing. I am trying to read my final slide at an angle and not doing a particularly great job of it. So if you will give me 1 moment, please, to try and see where that has gotten to in my packet.
It has to do with the, how often.
How often you intend.
Come to.
Yes, so we do have some really great attendance rates. For the most part, the vast majority of Garrett Park residents are in here 1 to 4 times a year. There are a couple of super attendees. I think they include council, though I don't believe council as a whole responded. But we do have 3.73% of you who are here for more than 10 events a year. Bravo. I hope you have fun. The other thing is kind of looking at class attendance. There had been some questions about how many folks are showing up for the regularly scheduled classes. As I believe is mentioned in the memo, but will be mentioned here, we do have 3 classes that on a somewhat consistent basis occur here. Those are the yoga class that traditionally are Monday night, except for when it's a council week, at which point they graciously move to Tuesday evening so we can all be here talking town business. Those include the Thursday night Tai Chi class. And generally there is a Music Together, which is the guardian and child youth music class that has historically run for both a Wednesday and a Thursday morning. In the slower sessions, they do drop down to only a Wednesday morning booking, but those are kind of our 3 most consistent events outside of official town functions. Those official town functions include committee meetings and obviously council meetings like we have here tonight. But for the most part, folks have not ever attended a class and are not currently attending a class. So it's not seeing a ton of foot traffic. Barb, if you could hit the next slide, please. So obviously we have a couple of different ratings for the most important feature in a facility. This was a question where you were asked to rank in order what was most important to you to what was least important. We do kind of have 3 clear front runners. As you can kind of see that all scored in at the 7, and then we have kind of a second tier priority for features. So as you think about designs and concepts, these are the elements that folks really value and emphasize. Barb, if you want to hit the next slide.
But that emphasize is only a mention of 7 times.
No.
It's a numerical score of 7 times. So if we were to have all of the data pulled up, which I believe is attached, when you rank it, let's say you ranked indoor space first, it's super scores. So the higher your super score, the more people put you in the higher top tier.
So to give you an idea, like I just looked at the numbers, looking at people ranked at, 1 or 2, there were 70 people out of the survey, and it was like 45% of the respondents would have ranked it, or the second one, the kitchen, was 75% ranked it. I'm sorry, 75 people ranked it 1 or 2, which is 48% of the respondents. But like Kayla said, all the data is on another sheet.
Yes, for those of you who really love to do the data deep dive, it is included as part of your agenda packet attachment. This is meant to be kind of your friendly, quick shot executive summary, but we do include the data because we know it's important. So moving into our kind of reviews of the specific conceptual designs provided by Weedman Architects. Conceptual design 1, which has its lengthy description at the bottom. I will not be attempting to read that. My optometrist is good, but they're not that good. But as you can kind of see, there are a decent number of folks who are saying this option appeals to me exactly as it is, but there are also a decent number of folks who are saying they are neutral. They have no real strong attachment or are not particularly repulsed. So nothing I would say that is super definitive. Barb, if we could hit the next slide, please. Question 2, we start seeing people who really do not care for this design. We were on concept 2. Yes. So concept 2, as you can see, we see more people saying this does not appeal to me at all, but we also see an increase in folks saying, you know, I'm neutral to this. Concept 3, please. And option 3. Folks really did not find this appealing. By far and away, the most clear response we got. So no true standout winner of the 3 concepts. For those of you who are present at the September 19th special town council session where folks were invited to give live feedback, it was pretty clear that there was no one true favorite to win. Barb, if we could go to the next slide, please. So we have,
Orange is proportional to the cost estimate.
there were some questions that you will see in the attached total data that asked about, did your preference change when you saw the Axios cost estimate? And there were some folks who indicated that it changed. If I recall correctly, the vast majority did say that they liked what they liked, regardless of the price tag, which, you know, I applaud the consistency. Thank you for your feedback. As we really started getting into the open-ended comments, that's when we start seeing some other responses and engagement. We did not see significant support for either a commercial kitchen or for renewable energy options. A lot of folks, I believe, were hesitant to commit to those given the associated price tag that came up, but that would be something to better answer for themselves. By and large, folks are open to the idea of removing the additions, but it's not something folks are, I think, particularly willing to die on. Obviously, you can see that there was not a high volume of support for doing any sort of bond issuance. Folks were asked to kind of, on a scale from 0, meaning absolutely not, to 100 being like, I would support this, give us a numerical ranking. Those numerical rankings were averaged out, and we came to an average response of 31.
And to be clear, this is bond as in the sense of taking out a loan, not a legislative bond.
Yes, this is a form of debt issuance.
Exactly.
So
But would the person filling this out know that?
we did try and make it clear that it was focusing on debt issuance. When you look at the attached data, you will see that the question should be included with the actual response. You can see what folks are responding to. Barb, if you want to head to the final slide of emerging themes. We did have a couple of consistent areas that were broadly and generally brought up in the open-ended comments. Some folks chose to give specific design elements that folks could talk about. The idea of doing pocket doors or folding walls actually came up, I believe, 2 or 3 separate times to allow for that flexibility and that ability to maintain that really prized flow that was repeatedly mentioned on the 19th at the meeting. Talking about flooring, we have carpeting on top of hardwood currently right now in this room. folks had a couple of different ideas for how to approach it, but it sounds like Garrett Park is home to a lot of folks who love to dance and would like a floor that supports that.
And
Ob-
for those of us who do yoga, we'd also like a non-carpeted floor.
So we could just roll back the rod, right? Or is there a reason why we can't do that? Is there some historic feature of the floor?
It's protecting, this one is currently protecting the current.
Right.
floor.
I think the current floor would take a lot of wear and tear. So if we wanted to accommodate dancing, I think we'd want to consider having a removable floor that could go to protect.
Yeah, I understand it's the floor and this is not stellar condition, so
Yeah.
the carpet's there to kind of get it to hang on.
So obviously, there are some more general areas of concern. There was a lot of support for getting this building up to code compliance and making the needed ADA improvements so we truly have an accessible public facility. Improved acoustics and audiovisual equipment integration.
That's always been in the plans.
Yes, well, folks really wanted to make sure we knew they supported that, and I can only imagine that the challenging audio of previous meetings really helped folks solidify their thoughts.
Sorry, what?
Councilmember Paskowski has a great sense of humor, but you did about skim. You did that. As has been repeatedly mentioned, the total raw data for the questions, as well as the total unfiltered comments from your neighbors and from everyone who chose to engage with that question, is attached to this memo. It is about 8 pages of comments. I suggest that if you really want to understand where folks are at, read through it. But otherwise, we had good engagement. We know a couple of things are off the table. We know a couple of things need to be talked about.
So I would like, council members, the summary of questions and emergent themes. I'm going to refer back to this as we continue the conversation. I'm sort of pulling that out of my packet from the president's walking. Thank you very much, madam. Let's.
Just a question on the last page of the slide presentation, 22 out of 23. Sorry, the penultimate. And there's a green bar. And I just wanted to know what I wonder what that word is that is associated with that green bar. It seems like
It's a rating, like how would do you support
Oh.
to debt for this?
30 out of 100.
So.
Well, it's actually 30%.
Yes or no?
No, it's,
No, we were looking more for a numerical response. Yeah, so the thermometer showed that we were very cold.
Oh, that's the 31.
That's the 31. My apologies for not making that clear. That's our 31.
so this is where it's fun. So I thought, first of all, I'm really excited for how well this is moving forward. We've been working on this, Steve, we've been working on this a decade-ish or more, that needing to renovate this building, and I'm really proud that we have gotten to this point and excited to keep moving. I don't think loss of momentum is on the agenda. But I think I was thinking that the best way to start this is to look at the general elements and kind of just thumbs up, thumbs down. Is this a yes? And we don't need to talk about it again because we definitely want to do this. For example, do we really still want to have a roof? Yeah, we do. Great. Let's not talk about that again. Do we definitely want to not have a commercial grade kitchen? We absolutely do not. No, let's not talk about that again. So I was thinking that we could kind of go through those elements, and it'll help us focus on what else still needs discussion.
Do we need to talk about the big money issues first, the 3 options,
No.
or are
I
we
don't
not
think so.
doing that?
I don't think, I think it's pretty clear that nobody really likes any of the 3 options, which is in itself a useful bit of information because it helped advance the ball. Like it gave us something to respond to, gave us something to get a sense of where people stand. And
Should we formally respond? I mean, that's what we presented to the community last time.
I don't,
Formal, or just not, we don't even have to vote on it.
I would not agree necessarily that that nobody liked any of the options. I think nobody really liked the price of any of the options.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. And
Yeah.
I still feel like it might be a little bit, they might have been a little bit overly conservative with their estimates, and that threw us off, I think. And the thing that's been, I'm realizing is that started to get a lot of attention in the kind of quick fix of deficiencies cost that was in the Axios report, but it's important to remember that they're doing that just from a facility assessor standpoint. They're not an architect. They're not a historic preservation architect. They're just looking at things of like, it literally doesn't meet code, or it's not current practice, and what's the cheapest, straight A to, point A to point B, straight line, what's the quickest way to get there? And a lot of them are not really that good of ideas. I think also the cost for that was probably a little bit wishful thinking too. So I think the trouble is it's a really wide gap. I'm not sure anybody really wants to spend over $2 million or $2.5 million, including soft costs. And it's not realistic to say you could do it for 300. That's a pretty big gap to go 2.5 to 300. But I have a feeling that the real direction is probably about halfway in between there, like to do something that really makes sense for this building. And it's just tough. I think we're kind of like stuck. Like I said, it's a pretty wide range.
So, but I think, well, I mean, I guess I don't follow Todd. I'm not quite sure what are you suggesting?
I mean, I guess I was just suggesting that we dismiss the three options formally that were presented by the architect. And then go from there, which seems like what you're doing anyway, except just to.
Okay, if that's what you guys want to do, I mean,
I would suggest not doing that.
Well, I mean, but I think, Steve, that, not that everybody hates all of them, but none of them perfectly capture what we want. And so we need to figure out what pieces we do want. And so it's not a rejection of everything we've seen. It's just, oh, now we know what it looks like, and we can start pulling those pieces and start to build our little Frankenstein building, I guess.
Yes, I guess I'm just worried. I don't want to
So-
throw out the baby with the bathwater. Like some of the concepts are in some of those three, they may not be done the exact same way. And I think there was a lot of reactions to, like, say, a second meeting room that were really in error. But there was never an idea of having like a meeting here and another big loud meeting in the back. It would be like an accessory to the larger meeting. Or if, say, you have a committee meeting, it's a pain when you have to bring in, to set up all the table and you're in this room with like 6 people. It would be a lot easier if there was a small room in the back to do that. So granted, we could potentially do that in town office if that room can be a swing space to be accessible from the hallway. So that kind of solves that one. And then the other one, I think it was unfortunate we didn't really have the information out there, but the point of option 3, like to have a larger room, was this room has so many deficiencies with acoustics and everything else. It's pretty good for just speaking, but it's never really been that good for music. So the idea was, and it probably is something we just can't afford, this luxury, but if you had a really great specialty room in the back, then if you had an event that used that specialty, say it was music, you would use that room and then just use this room for a reception. And if you had a big speaking event like town dinner, you'd use that and use the other room as an accessory.
Let's come to that though.
Yeah,
Let's
we can
say-
come back around to them, but
Yes.
yeah.
Joanna, Lisa wants to talk.
Lisa, yes, please.
So my concern is that I don't think the design 1, 2, or 3 really meets what the majority of the town that I spoke to would really like to see in terms of the flow of being able to serve people, to have a better flow and better sight views from the front to the back. So I still think the actual design that we end up with still needs some refinement and some work. So
Absolutely.
I agree with you that we're going to go through kind of options that we're going to discard and go forward, but I'm not sure we're at the point where we have a design that we're happy with and that really maximizes what we're trying to accomplish. So I just want to make sure in the process that we keep sight of that.
Okay,
And I would just want to add, I'm sorry, very quickly, that I agree and think that we need to proceed and make some of these changes sort of a la carte as being suggested, but we need to watch the price, because the big problem from many of these comments and from a lot of the people that I talked to and that we heard from collectively is about the price. And so I would just hope we can be attentive to that as we go.
Let me just say that about the price. Until you have real plans, and Steve chime in, but until you have real plans and specs and you have real bids from subcontractors, you're not, and you can go through some value engineering, you're not really, the only purpose of the Axios prices was to give us some kind of order of magnitude. But I don't think that prices right now are realistic and really helpful in terms of deciding if we're really spending $3 million or $1.5 million, because we don't know what it is we're really building. So I would just caution to not focus on the money as much as what it is we want this building to do, and then go through the process of design, plans and specs, bids from general contractors and subcontractors to know what it is we're really talking about in terms of price.
Fairly.
I guess I'm not sure if this is a question for Joanna or for Stephen, but is it best for us at this stage of design to whittle down to one option that we're going to build out? Or would it be okay at this point to focus on two options, the very basic, just meet code, and perhaps one that goes a little further, say building on option 1 or 2?
Okay, so I want to kind of rein this in.
I just
because
wanted to
I-
understand, are we looking for one option or are we looking for still multiple options for the next stage?
This is
Because I mean, otherwise it's hard for me to understand what we're trying to accomplish. That's all.
And I think in hearing these questions, let me share my vision. I think that the next thing that we are going to make a formal decision about is identifying what's most important and taking it back to Wiedemann and saying, let's get a different concept. Say, you know, if what's most important to us is being able to accommodate town dinners and soup dinners and this party, you know, and if that's the thing, what's the building? What does it look like? What does a building look like that accommodates that? And that we sort of almost not start from scratch, but to some extent say, now that we really have a sense of what everybody says is most important, what is that? How do we accommodate that in a building? And I think that the way to get to that, and honestly, I mean, I almost thought about just drafting like, oh, I absolutely understand this vision that people are saying. You know, I almost made a little doodle because I think that that's kind of, once we can see that concept, that sort of generic concept, I think we'll be getting closer. So I think that once we know what the pieces are that we do and don't want, do we want solar? Do we not want solar? Do we want a generator? I mean, once we know what those things are, I think that this is not the council saying, we want it to look like this and we're drawing a picture, but it's what we're sending back to Wiedemann and asking them to give us another concept that is closer to the actual functionality, because that's what they do is, I mean, they did what we asked. We asked them to have this number of spaces and or these different uses, but we didn't really do that with the big picture of what the town is, what's most important, which is that flow and that accommodation of big parties.
But a lot of people don't, that's not that important to them, and that what's important to them is the cost. And so I'm wondering if we can't figure out, even if it's an order of magnitude, for example, are we agreed that we don't want to make structural changes, but rather interior ones? That would be an order of magnitude change, which would reduce the cost. It seems like we may be at that point.
I really disagree with that approach. I
disagree with the approach too. I think we've got to work on.
Figure out what we want. And then if it's supportive enough, if 80% of the town or 80% of whatever says, wow, we really want a roller skating rink in here, then they're going to figure out, oh, maybe it is okay that we ask for, you know, a small amount of debt. I mean, I think if what we actually want is expensive, I think that residents will understand. And I think that I think what we need to figure out is get a building to look like what we want it, or to function the way we want it to function. And that is not dismissing that cost is an important element. It's just that it is not it's not how we should proceed with doing a project for generations to come without. I disagree with letting money be the main driver.
Well, it doesn't seem that popular. That could be the driver.
I disagree that that's the case. I think that a lot of people said they didn't want to take out loans. But
Agree with
Phil,
you.
I'm happy to let you try to say, or,
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. And I think one thing we have to be a little careful of is that, as you had mentioned, we have to look at this for future generations and what will people be doing with it, after we've since retired and moved on. And we look at Penn Place. I mean, Penn Place, definitely they had to take out they got some grants, and they also had to, take out a loan for it. It didn't kill the town. I mean, we had to pay for a loan, obviously, but it wasn't like there's this huge increase in taxes that I'm aware of. It wasn't like it really was killing us. So, I mean, it's not to say that we've got a blank check here, but on the other hand, if we're encumbered constantly by pinching pennies on this thing, we may end up with something that turns out to be unworkable or is not as good as we should have had if we had only spent 10% more.
and I also think that the message we've gotten from feedback in person on the survey, just all of us talking is, I haven't heard anybody say we want a grandiose, the biggest, most extravagant thing. Like, I don't think that's the direction that anybody's wanting to go. And so the question isn't, well, how are you going to justify spending $3 million? That's not the question. The question is, what do we actually want? And
What's going to be the most useful for this town?
what's going to be most useful for the town?
But there might be an argument that what is most useful for this town is to save that money, use it in other ways, and not overextend the town's budget for whatever it is we're planning. I mean, if we were gonna have the other assembly room and crawl space basement, that seems quite inefficient. If we're gonna remodel, if we're gonna spend a lot of money to remodel in this building, that would also seem somewhat inefficient. Why don't we make choices that we can afford readily as part of our operating budget and not have to do it? Why don't we make choices and limit our scope so that we can live within the budget? That seems to be the clear message. And I would like to add, because I asked for the information about how often this building is even used, what percentage of the time. I suspect it's 10%, 20%. I mean, really, let's think
okay.
about the
So-
future, exactly, about not putting ourselves in debt.
So Councilmember Eisenstadt, I'm going to chime in to talk a little bit about the usage of the building and what data we had available to us. As council will recall, we did make a transition over to a new website in the summer. Part of that transition was to make it easier for residents and for non-residents to book themselves into town hall, to kind of make it a simple self-serve so that you're not trying to catch up with town office. Unfortunately, because of how long the old system hung on to data and because of the transition, we don't have good historic data to pull on for how many events we were consistently hosting in the immediate kind of aftermath of COVID. As I believe is mentioned in Town Manager Matthews' memo, we do identify our most consistent users outside of town government, which are the 3 classes that we touched on earlier, as well as a number of private events that we had on the calendar from when we made the transition in mid-July of this year up through the end of calendar year 2023. I can tell you we already have a number of folks who are trying to book into 2024.
But do we know what percentage of the time it's been occupied during the period for which we?
I'm not going to be able to give you a percentage of the time, but I can tell you I started doing some broad strokes hourly thing. Because here's the challenge. Every reservation is going to be different. The yoga class is only in here for 3 hours on the reservation, but we have a number of Saturday graduation parties where we have memorials. Those are oftentimes full day affairs. When we look at percentage of the time the building is in use, I can tell you that for a council meeting like today, the building is blocked off from, at a minimum, noon on a Monday and will be blocked off through the end of the evening. So I can tell you on a daily basis, you're going to lose probably 60% of your available hours on a council day. But council days aren't constant.
Right, but weekends, like most weekends, there is at least one booking. right?
Most weekends are at least one bookings. I can tell you from looking at the November and December calendars, this upcoming weekend is an anomaly in that we don't currently have anything on the books for this upcoming weekend. But I can tell you that for the weekends thereafter, including Thanksgiving weekend, we do have folks in here often for full day.
That's the weekend. How about, I mean, there's the 5 weekdays and sure, it's booked 3 hours on Monday, or maybe it's booked 9 or 10 hours, right?
It can be.
So-
I think it's kind of,
So
common knowledge that this is not a space that's used 24/7. There's not a demand for this place.
It's 30% usage.
It's-
Kind of what we're getting at.
It is not, it does not pay for itself. We don't take in enough receipts. We don't take take in as much rental as it costs us to pay for staff to prepare it for things. It doesn't pay for itself. I mean, I think that's, you know,
It's a
but that's
community.
also not the purpose of it.
Right, and also if you think about it as a potential user, if this were fully booked all the time, you'd always have to get on a waiting list. You'd have to book it years in advance. And as a resident who might want to book it just a month in advance, I like that it's a community center that's fairly accessible to everyone, not just the people who plan 3 years in advance their events.
So, okay, Todd, you asked a question that seemed like an easy, let's get the pulse of the other council members. I wish I remembered what it was, but it was something along the lines of whether to identify our current, like our, how much money we have, and I don't remember, I'm sorry. Was there something in particular that was there?
Yeah, I mean, well, the question was whether we can, before we start shopping lists, sort of decide what our budget is. in some regard.
Yes. Who wants to do that? Can we, is there a pulse, like, do you want to start with what our budget is? You want to identify how much we want to spend before we move on, or do you want to go for, do you
Just
want to
in a-
talk about the, like what the town, like what the elements are, what we want the building to be, and
I still think it would help to like just find out what that shopping list is and then
yes.
be able to
like-
give that
like
to.
Todd's asking if we want to start with.
Understood, but
budget.
just as a thought on it, just for Todd's consideration. Maybe think about what makes sense to program into it, and then we could give that back to the architects and to the estimators too, and they might be able to tell us right off the bat, hey, you're not moving the needle much, below option 1. Or they could say, well, this is a major change, maybe this, maybe it seems more doable. We might find out we're in a good range. If we try, I'd worry if we try to like make it too small of a cart, then it's not meaningful enough of a renovation to really make it worthwhile. I think it would be different if this building was really like in structural deficiency. It's not. If it was like ready to fall down, it's not, even though some residents will say that. So it's functioning just fine. Granted, it needs some work in the back, but we weren't sure what's going to happen with the back. But it's not like we're in code violation and the building has to be shut down. It's not like it's our drinking water that's at stake. So this could sit with no change for 2 years. It's not an emergency, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'd feel like we should get something that's enough worthwhile to figure out that that's a worthwhile enough scope, or else just do nothing. I would rather do nothing than.
Okay, so I'm asking council members, do you want to identify a budget and work from there? Or do you want to identify or do you want to look at it from what uses we want, or how we want to use it, and then figure out the pricing after that? So, anybody want to chime in?
I would like to just add that I understand the position of trying to get items and then price them. I would just seek that at the end of this, that we try to, when we have budgets, realize that unless we're going to do another survey, which it would be great to have more time for the council to participate in as well before it's launched. But not to say this isn't, I mean, these are good results, but just to say that it seems that people didn't support more. There's questions of cost and questions of usage that I think are all relevant, that we should consider as we go. but yes, okay, let's get the items and then price them. But hopefully we will get to come back and consider after that, which parts of it we want. We will take an à la carte approach then too, or we will take what they give us as options, our new options, 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, they don't get to decide what we actually build. So this, I mean, that's never the case, but, and it's not like we're just gonna give everybody a blank check. Anybody,
Just one thought that may help like focus it a little bit is like, I think it said it was like 66 or 68%. Kayla, maybe you remember like where the 1 to 4 time a year
Mhm.
users, and there were the super users that were like 3% above that. Like the way I pictured it is I think we need to do something that a lot of that 68% is going to be satisfied with, or almost all that 68% satisfied. We're not going to be able to satisfy, nor should we really spend the money to satisfy the super users. I think that the super users are probably the ones that would be, they want everything, you know, on the list. So it's just a thought that I think could help us, like something that has a lot of broad usage amongst town, because I think you raised a good point that there are a lot of other things in town. It's not like a lot of people don't spend all their, you know, weeks here.
And if we do this, it means we can't do something else. And if there's an emergency and we need money and we're already leveraged, that makes more difficulties for us.
okay.
Not
We're
necessarily.
leveraged, though.
We're not.
We're not.
Yeah, we're not.
If we do for this project.
Yeah.
And
So-
some other need occurs, then we cannot further do so.
I don't foresee us spending $3 million. I mean, I don't think that's the direction that anybody is, that the town is, that residents are saying they want. They don't want the biggest option. And so I don't, well. So would you guys, do you want to do budget, or do you want to start, can we sort of identify elements and try to move forward a little bit?
I'd like
Yes, please, Lisa.
I'd like to move forward with a scope of use and design before we talk about budget. Because the budget numbers we're getting are not real numbers. So I think having that dictate what it is we're doing is not to the best needs of the community. And I also think that if we do a nice job of renovating this space, it's going to generate more use by community residents. So I just think we should think about what it is we want this building to do before we worry about the cost.
I also, sorry, go ahead, Jerry.
No, I was just going to weigh in on that question. I also think that we should focus more on functional items first. However, I think implicit in that those decisions will be more or less small, medium, large. We're going to be implicitly making small, medium, large scope decisions, and that will encompass budget framing, right? But I think trying to tack that to a dollar amount at this point really just doesn't quite work for me in terms of hemming in the future design too much.
Yeah, it's understood. We can't hem in we can't know exact dollars, but having a sense of small, medium, and large would be helpful. Maybe we want to go for small or medium. Maybe the town told us they don't want large.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
Yes, I think that's accurate. I also, initially, when we sent out the survey before we had the presentation from Wiedemann in September, I'd sort of set as a target, a November sort of choice, or sort of getting to a finish line or a medium, a next phase. And I don't want us to feel rushed with that if it takes us longer than that, because I don't think that we can make the decisions, certainly not tonight, sitting here and make all the decisions about, oh yes, this is exactly what we want, the full concept draw, or the full drawings to be looking like. So I don't want you to feel rushed by that.
That's good. It's just too much of a range, I think.
And it's
So
not.
big
and that's
rock
not-
functions is what you're trying to
Say
get.
again?
Are you trying to get to tonight? Big rock
I wanna look at-
decisions,
Yes.
big functions?
Yes.
Okay.
And then my hope is to send that to Wiedemann and say, hey, what can we get for a few $100 or something? Can you do a drawing that's not, you don't have to make sure everything's perfect to scale, whatever the thing is, just so they can say, so for example, there's a lot of concern about too many hallways. Okay, well,
It's
what
pretty
can
easy
we
to
do? Like,
solve, yeah.
what's some back of the envelope drawing that you all can do for us that's informal? So that we can put it before residents again and informally, formally, not quite sure that format, yes, just to say, is this closer? Are we getting closer to what we're looking for?
Mhm.
So,
And I'm sorry to, just one other point is that there was a lot of opposition to the charges by Wiedemann, and I understand that the costs are not real at this point. But is there another quote we could get, or?
we did a competitive bid, a completely appropriate way of doing it. So I don't foresee that for this next phase.
So this is still part of that same bid?
No, this would be a,
No, the problem wasn't with the cost of Wiedemann themselves. The problem was with the cost of their estimates.
oh
The
yeah,
square
I think
foot
that's, but I,
price was outrageous according to many people.
and I think that those people were misinformed and didn't
Mhm.
know what.
They
frankly,
they
didn't know
were,
what they were
but
talking about.
they were, but where the cost is really high is the addition. So that is helpful to maybe think about that, the cost and concept as we talk through things, that because the rear addition may or may not be salvageable or make sense to reuse, but that certainly going to be the cheaper option than an addition. So
So I'd like
Okay.
to go through my checklist and just ask
Yeah.
questions, right? Name an element. Let's see if it's an absolute yes, an absolute no, or let's keep thinking, okay? Removing the front addition. Is there a sense? We had according to the summary of questions from the survey, 59%, no, I'm sorry, 55% would consider removal of both the front addition and the back. Anybody, you want to
I'm in favor of removing.
removing the addition? Anybody else in favor of thumbs up for removing the addition? Thumbs up for removing the addition?
Yes, I think there was strong community
Or
interest in that.
removing the addition?
I'm not sure that it would be that useful or justifies the price, but I don't have a strong opinion about it.
you have a neutral.
Sure,
Okay,
depending on the price.
okay. What about well, I don't want to come to the back addition. What about a full basement?
What do you
Want
define
to
as the
dig out-
full?
I mean, this is like,
Under this, it was the $1 million.
I know the answer to
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
I know the answer to this, but I wanted to ask.
No, but it's this,
It's the full basement among the entire thing with the elevator and the.
Oh, yeah.
Inhabitable by everybody.
Opposed.
no.
That thumbs down from Lisa.
Yeah.
Todd?
Yeah, Get your thumb in the screen, Lisa. There you go.
Okay, commercial kitchen, who wants to put in the commercial kitchen? Lisa says yes. I'm kidding.
I would if it
Thumbs-
was a different site, but not for here.
Opposed.
It's too
Okay.
self-access.
All right. What about solar panels? Now, one of the questions, I know one of the comments, I'm writing this. One of the comments about solar panels is, why are we hiding that? You know, why don't we want to project it to the, world and be a good example for using solar? And we don't have to just put it on the back, we can put it in the front, but the issue, we can't do that. Like from a historic preservation perspective, I don't think we're allowed.
The county said they would rather not have them. They told Wiedemann that they would rather not have them up there, but I wonder if they wouldn't bend on that if approached again.
Okay,
And can I make a quick comment? That could also be an option too,
which,
the solar panels.
what do you mean by option?
Right, you could still keep it
You could still
modular,
keep-
the
you could-
solar panels and the
We could,
geothermal.
we could do the solar panels later if we decided to. I mean, I'm fine with doing solar panels, but I'm also saying that we could also mark it as being an option, saying that if we're gonna run into budget issue, then we turn around and say, okay, we'll do it later.
Okay. Do you want to go that route of like, it's an option, but it's like one of those things, or like it's a yes? Well, actually, I don't know if it's a yes, but is it a yes, except that's one of the first things that gets on the chopping block if.
I thought
If we-
they were also potentially on the chopping block after.
Yeah, it's
We're
got
doing an
support.
itemization.
Okay, then fair enough.
Right.
Fair enough.
Or not decision really, right?
Okay. I'll go with yes then.
A yes, support.
I would support.
Yes.
Yeah, I would support keeping it in for now.
Just a sidebar of it.
I would say yes, if it's cost effective to add
Yeah.
solar panels.
And it could be tied, like, when we first started looking at this building years ago, the normal was to do a gas-fired boiler, and now that's kind of going the way of the dodo bird. So it could be that by the time you do an electric heat pump here and you have the solar, this building could kind of, kind of generate and cover itself. It could be almost net zero in a way. So
So you want to,
I think it'd be worth studying that. And the other potential, it adds more cost and you got to figure out where to put it. Because there's a concern about what happens if they burn, that they could be toxic, but you could put a battery, backup storage for, power generated off the roof. If you wanted it for emergency use, you could have a battery that covers it. So
Yeah, and there was
Right,
strong
yes.
community support. I mean,
strong support
for the renewable energy
Yeah,
options.
not, yes, yeah. What about a generator?
Yes.
I think that's essential.
yeah, I would be in favor of a solar with a battery over generator. I'm not sure why we need a generator here if we have one at Penn Place.
We
We
may need
don't.
it as a shelter in
Right.
certain circumstances.
Lisa?
I'd push that
Are
off
you
for the next
strong?
generation.
Or you're
Strong
muted.
favor?
You're muted.
I'd be in favor of a generator.
Todd?
I'd be in favor of a generator.
Okay. Okay, what about, restoring the church tower? These are kind of random order.
That goes with removing the front addition, basically.
Yeah,
Does it?
I thought that was all. Okay.
There's a lot of the details are either covered up or were taken away. So,
Gotcha, so can't restore it without taking off the front addition, is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
yeah,
Okay.
they would be tied together.
Okay, and does it make sense to not restore it, but take off the front addition?
They would touch it up, but I think it's kind of mangled. What happened with the details up there? They're kind of mangled by that addition. So it would be
Is
a
there-
light touch, or else put it back
Okay,
to the original design.
so support for, since we're removing the addition, or we think that's the direction we want to go. Yes, to tying the church tower to that also?
Depends on price.
I'm yes for restoring it back. I mean, if we're gonna take off the front addition, then
Yeah, I think it goes along with the front
Okay.
addition.
I'm good with it.
What about the stage? Historic, or Garrett Park Historic Preservation Committee looked at that. I asked them to talk, or to consider their thoughts about the stage area. It's not very long. I'm gonna read. I don't know if everybody got this.
We
Did you?
did,
Yeah.
it was sent.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you okay with my reading what they said about
Yeah.
the stage?
Yeah.
Phil, you okay with that?
yeah. Go for
Okay.
it.
Garrett Park Historic Preservation Committee supports consideration of modification of this interior space that, which could include lowering the stage floor to the same level as the meeting room floor, as well as removing walls in the same area. So for example, eliminating the closets on the two sides to provide more square footage in the meeting room. The ceiling, including the rudimentary proscenium, I don't know what that is, could also be modified to achieve a larger unitary main meeting room and potentially improve acoustics. The stage is likely to be original to the 1897 building, which was an Episcopal church. When Garrett Park applied for the National Register of Historic Places status in 1975, the application describes the interior. The interior, like the exterior, is simple, containing three major elements. The narthex is located at the side of the nave, much like a single transept intercepting a cruciform plant. I do not know these words. With the altar to one side and the pews to the other. The pews have painted white sides with a dark stained oak seat and back. The sanctuary is centered on the main aisle and raised two risers above the nave floor. Once the town acquired the building in 1968, the stage was used for plays by the Garrett Park Players and other performances. It has, however, been used less frequently in the last several decades. Leveling the floor and modifying the walls would allow for ADA access and expand the space for events. Modified ceiling could possibly improve the poor acoustics. However, professional acoustic engineering would be required for this. So they are open to leveling the stage.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think we're getting much bang for our buck there. It's not a lot of additional space. And I think it really would lessen the character of the room considerably, which really concerns me. I think we can, the room gives access. It's not like you can't still have performances with people who need accessibility. Usually they just make arrangements for everybody to be able to participate, combination of stage in the front area. So to me, I just don't think that one's worth the loss of character or worth the funding it would cost to make that change.
I will agree with you on that. And I will also say that I've talked to several people, including my yoga instructor, who basically said that it's good to have the stage because it's nice to be slightly
need the
above the
elevation.
people when you're doing things.
Yeah, I think if anything, it might be one of those ones where it's could be helpful to show it both ways to kind of see what the reaction is both ways, but it would be unfortunate to lose it. Even though it doesn't get used a lot, we would kind of lose that ability to have some sort of a stage. You'd really just have a big box of a room otherwise. And I'm not sure, other than the town dinner, when we really have a capacity issue in this room. I think that's probably the only thing that really fills the building. That it may not be, like you said, Jerry, maybe it's just not enough bang for the buck to do it. So
To remove it.
to remove it. Yeah.
It also
so-
would put more pressure on storage elsewhere in the building if we got rid of those 2 closets.
We
Or
probably
if we
could make
just
them up.
reconfigured it. So are you? Okay,
Well,
so
one
you
of the
want to
big-
see both ways? You want to, because the other thing is that opening that up and leveling it would allow us to open to the back.
Yeah, I think if it's concept plans, it may be worthwhile to see it both ways, because then you could see, like you could have obvious pros and cons to both. Like if pro is it's all level and accessible, anybody could do anything, you got more space, and the obvious con is there's no stage, no focal point anymore.
But stage could be built. I mean, not that we have unlimited storage space, but we
Yeah.
could potentially build a riser or do something that
Temporary.
would
yeah.
allow us to have that.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, if it's concepts, maybe it is worthwhile
would
to
you think
just
so?
get it.
Okay with seeing what it looks like both ways, seeing what.
I mean, I guess let's see what it looks like both ways. I agree with Jerry Lee historically and
Okay.
with regard to the way the building looks, and we've always seen it. It's had the stage, and I just think it's part of the character of the building.
When people say that at town dinners, there's sometimes not enough space, and this will help create more space. I'm somewhat new here. When was the last town dinner? And I'm just curious about.
It's once a year.
January.
Yeah, but that's not the
once a
only
year.
thing, but that event itself is not the only.
Right.
Yeah, the soup supper also uses pretty much the same amount.
I think I agree that I would prefer to leave it.
I mean, the space would get used whether it's up or down for those events. It's just a matter of like, how important is the stage? And I think the other big part of this was that it's really a non-starter to put the piano up on there.
Right.
So if it's gonna be lean towards keeping it, we need to find another plan for the piano that's not up
Well,
there.
So,
And it's better to have accessibility to it as well.
right, but I didn't understand why there was a need to find another location for the piano. Was it just so that there could be a meeting space in the current piano room? It seems to be working fine to move the
Yeah.
piano between this room and that room.
I mean,
I would disagree. I mean, I think that's what I was kind of hearing from this is that a lot of people appreciate the flow, but usually that room gets mostly avoided because there's a piano in it.
and you're not allowed to put stuff
Yeah,
on.
so if
you know,
you-
like it's.
Yeah, so that's like your prime pre-function room to this space, and it's kind of a quarter of it's kind of taken out. So I think if you find some other solution for that, then you got more free flowing in a prime.
That would be
location.
adding the facility, that'd be adding another room in the back that you could use as a
Well, but.
Yeah, but it's usually you want your pre-function right outside your door. Usually it's 30 to 50% of the size of the room. So you're kind of like, that's what hurts the flow now, is you kind of almost bypass that room. So if we could get it closer, that would be better.
I'd like to keep the flatten the storage stage option. So that, see if there's, I don't want to say yes, don't say no, but can we keep that? Jerry, would you be willing to consider?
I don't see the point, but
Okay,
The one thing I did hear from somebody was talking about supporting it is that it wouldn't necessarily be just like leveling that part. You could take out the closets. There's a window over there, and you could take out this closet. If you could replace the storage in the back, which I think programmatically there's enough room to do it, to get sufficient storage back there. That would just make this room be a bigger volume altogether.
it could also potentially be a space where we could have tables and chairs. I mean, like we could focus those closer to the space where they're used more often.
If we priced it with the change to the stage,
Mhm.
would that impact other items as well, or could we just price that? Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's implications for the other structural parts of buildings, and that's to me what makes it difficult to just consider that one thing.
Right, I mean, I think what it. what I'm imagining is that if this weren't here, it would allow for different movements or different parts. It wouldn't say that the kitchen, I mean, who knows, maybe the kitchen should be right here. I don't know. But like if it gave other options, I think it would be kind of harder to separate that out and just say that. Now, if there's insufficient support for lowering the stage, then let's just not do it at all. Let's not even put that.
I'd be okay with just looking at a concept if it's a quickie, but I don't know if I'm.
Lisa,
of
you're okay
only
with
two.
looking at
Yeah, I'd like to look at the concept, and I also would like to get the closets out and the windows open. I think the space could be more designed to be a little better flow and not little chopped up rooms like it is now.
Okay. What about the back addition? So the back addition, not original. And one reason for removing it is to have it be of higher quality. If we remove the back addition, does that mean we would just have less space, or would we inherently need to then build a new addition?
I don't think you're gonna have enough space without it. So I think the big question was like Wiedemann early on, they recommended not keeping that addition and doing a new one instead. They had some concerns about the quality of the construction and the low ceilings and the structural loading. So it'd probably be useful to get some more information if they look at it again to see, is there a way it could be fixed up and get a new life, maybe heavily modify it, and you may not recognize what it used to look like, kind of like Penn Place was the same way, but maybe it can be salvaged and redone.
So I guess the question is, are we tied to it from a historic perspective? Do we have a warm fuzzy feeling about the back, or are we okay with it?
I don't think anybody does, but
So
Sounds like a large expense for a little return. I mean, my question is, what will we get out of the
I would agree. It's the kind of thing, is the cost of an addition, it would be like if this was really meant to be something attracting outside users at a higher dollar, which it's like 99.5% of people are on the opposite side of that coin, then I think it would make more sense, but it's tough to justify for just community use.
okay, so
Well-
let's see if we can shore it up.
I would
Yeah.
like to see for both there and for here, I have yet to see anybody who's definitively looked, or maybe I've missed it, at both of these buildings, inspecting the foundations, the structure underneath to verify that they're in good shape and we're not gonna have a big gotcha when we open the walls up. And also, as you've mentioned, Steve, is that we want to look at the floor loads to make sure it's going to be able to take the floor loads, it'll be up to essentially code, if you will, or we can bring them up to code. And the same with the foundation, because personally, I don't know what's under there. Maybe you've looked to see what's under there.
Barb, was that part of the work done was an assessment of the foundations?
I believe so, but I would want to confirm that with Wiedemann and Axios.
I think actually it said, we should confirm, but my recollection is they said that they're not in any kind of problematic stage or dangerous stage. I think Wiedemann just was saying that they're not really great quality to invest in, but maybe it could work out. It's not uncommon for an older building like this to have been built with just, they're really kind of stretching the limit of how far the joists go and how they're spaced. And by the time you double up a bunch of them in a heavier renovation, it can get you a lot more capacity.
Okay, so we want to, please.
I would support a new addition in the rear
So you
and
support
opening it up to the back. Yes. I
So
would.
taking off what's there and putting an entirely new addition.
Yes.
Okay. Phil, do you?
I would go with a new addition, but I'm willing to, as long as we could prove that what's back there would be salvageable, then I would.
So if it's salvageable, I mean, if it's salvageable, just.
We could flatten everything out, I guess, and redo it,
reconfigure it, yeah.
reconfigure it.
Okay.
I wonder if it's possible to put the,
Okay.
I wonder if it's possible to for them to look at two different options and have some big breakout components. Like I took that one estimate and broke out the exterior from the historic renovation plus the addition. I wonder if they could do the same thing, kind of say, hey, it cost you X amount of dollars to fix the front, and then it cost you Y amount of dollars to reconfigure the back addition, or Z to replace it. That way we can kind of see where the gaps are.
Okay. Okay, so
They probably could do that.
comparison,
So it wouldn't be like a total, yeah.
But we're not talking about making a huge addition, like that's not, I don't think that
Right,
anybody's.
more the option one edition, right, versus,
I don't have. it
Well,
in front of me,
since-
but it's like, it's whether we keep the footprint as it is and just shore up the, like renovate the space, take down the walls, but keep the foundation, or start with a new foundation and
Expand it. yeah.
expand. And
That's the big difference. Yeah, it's
So-
really,
so let's, we need to know the difference between, is it more expensive? Is it better for us to like? Okay, I think.
well, it's not that it's more expensive. The question is, what is the difference gap between shoring it up?
Yeah.
Because I believe we were given the impression before that the condition was so bad that it might not be a huge difference.
Okay.
or have them take another look at it and see like, or find out what it was that maybe there something wasn't written in that report that really concerned them. It might be that the block is too small or.
I mean, to me,
I don't know.
it's two things. One is it dangerous and do we need to shore it up? And then the second one is, do we want an expansion of the functionality back there? I would say yes to the first and no to the second.
Yeah, I think what his point was that it was not that it was any kind of like structural thing that was ready to fall apart, more that it was kind of like dumping a lot of money into an old car. Like it was kind of beyond its useful life, and it's not really useful to, put lipstick on that pig. So
What about outdoor space? One of the options sort of had didn't option 3 have a
Gazebo.
gazebo, but it wasn't just a gazebo, it was
Or an
like a
arbor.
modular outdoor.
It's more of an
space.
arbor
But it was.
than a
it was-
gazebo.
No, I'm thinking of, it was like the back room of it. Could be opened up to be like an indoor outdoorish kind of space.
No.
Was that
Okay.
back space.
No.
So that back room. Could be sort of indoor outdoor-ish.
There was some discussion about that, Mayor, when you all did the kind of mid-design review. That was not something that was incorporated into the final concept design. So, yeah, option 2 had an arbor, option 3 had a trellis. If
I
that's
think we
helpful.
threw out the idea, maybe it had a screen porch attached to the back or something.
So do we want there to be? Do we want the backyard to have any structures in the grass? Like, do we want a gazebo or anything like that? Or do we want it to just be plantings and grass? Or
Lisa has her hand up.
Sorry, Barb, what?
Yeah.
Lisa has her hand
Yeah,
up.
I'm sorry, please, Lisa.
I'm okay with no arbor in the back and no trellis in the back, no structure in the garden area,
It would be the same. I feel like it's a lot of added maintenance for
nothing.
not much likeliness of a use. And it's an awkward space to me, like a backyard behind a public building in between 3 houses. I think it's just,
Small.
I feel like it would not, you purposely not want to be noisy, and I don't know, it just feels awkward to me. The front yard, I feel like has more use to it. Maybe that's just me. I don't think it's going to get used that much. The back.
Phil,
I
what do you
know
think?
people
I agree.
feel like it was used,
You
but
don't think an outdoor, a backyard,
No,
physical structure?
no backyard physical structure.
No, but-
But, I mean, if in the future we change our minds, we can still do so. But for this round, I would say definitely not.
I'm okay with that. I'm somewhat neutral.
So it sounds like nobody wants any outdoor physical structure. Okay,
Phil had a great point. That's easy to add.
Yeah,
That's
it's
the
easy
big
to
if.
add. It's just not a high priority at this
Yeah.
time.
okay. All right,
Does your list include, Mayor, ADA compliant bathrooms?
yeah, I don't think that's, I mean, I can.
I
ask
don't
that
think that's
question.
really
It's a
optional.
requirement. That's not,
Right.
Okay.
that's not optional.
If you do any kind of monetary like seriousness on this building, you have to do them by
Yeah.
code. So
Yeah.
it's kind of either leave it as is or do it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Lisa, I took
That's
that
okay.
for granted that was, like automatic.
But I would make an extremely strong recommendation to put the 2 of them together, and it's ideal to have them. It's a little bit cheaper to put them together, but it's always better. It's just kind of like elevators. You put them together that way. If somebody's waiting for one, that get whatever one comes next. You're not at opposite end of the building, and I think it's also would be ideal. Like if they're put together somewhere, I wouldn't support what Axios said was the lowest cost, which is literally was to make that into one bathroom and put a second one in the piano room, which I think is a non-starter. But they were just trying to show like what's the simplest way, the fastest way to get.
Is there a
Get them.
question about needing two? Two is a yes, right?
You have to,
That's
by
right.
code,
Okay.
yeah.
They have
to.
to be issued,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
The other thing that would help is to have some space in between, so you're not like in the room and everybody knows you're waiting for the bathroom. And you get a little bit more private space, like a vestibule
Okay.
that can be designed in.
Can we do an additional bathroom without adding external structure? I mean. the
Oh, they
idea is
they
that
could
we
fit
would-
back there, yeah.
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 Okay.
So it could either be one here and one back there, or it could be both.
I think
back
two
there.
together. I think both
Yeah, they
together.
should be together.
But do you
If you were doing a new building, you would not do
you
it any
wanna
other way.
dictate where we want to put, I mean, I agree toward the back, but do we want to, can we just say we want two together? Does does anybody care about that?
Well, if you look at option 3, for example, they do have it together. You know, it's kind of hard to see, but I think that you could do a 2 together and it would work out. Well, with what Stephen was saying, you know, you could have, they're across from each other, they're useful to both parties. You're not necessarily standing in front of a whole bunch of people waiting for the bathroom, that sort of thing. But one thing to keep in mind though is if we're gonna do something like this 2 together, we want to remove this bell top, this front addition. It automatically says that we got to do something back here.
Right.
Mhm.
I think it's weird to have the bathroom at the front anyway, no?
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
I would agree.
So
Yeah,
We didn't
so
figure that
strong
out.
preference for two together.
Yeah.
two together,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Are there other, I mean, that's the end of my list of things that I wanted to sort of make sure,
I would just like to add that we have more open flow for
Right.
serving and,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
it just needs a better flow for people.
okay.
What if-
Right, sorry. Yeah, because I think just to clarify on the flow, that was something that we got a lot of comments
Yes,
about, both
understood.
in the meeting and in the survey. But I think the point being that we want to be able to have simultaneous events, but we don't have to have, you know, purely acoustic free or acoustic supported separate rooms with walls.
I think that's right. I think that's right. And I also think, given that there are a lot of families who bring their kids to events here, having a different place where the kids can go and be entertained away from everybody else is a positive thing. So I don't think
I
we're gonna
think
end up
that's-
with
yeah.
a
Right.
single space.
Right, so
Um,
we're looking for more of an open concept where a
Absolutely.
meeting or a different class could take place in a
Right.
different part of the building, but not necessarily in an enclosed room.
And it's important, it could be an accessory. It doesn't have to be two separate things, but it could be like a smaller group of the group. So,
Yeah,
Or could, yeah, Joanna, I was thinking, gonna say the same thing and you just beat me to it, but that's the perfect point of where you've got an adult function and you've got the ability to have your kids in the back, and a lot of people like that these days.
Yep.
Plus you've got the ancillary, you know, if you have a wedding or something, you want to have a reception in one room and a service in the other, you want to do a staging in one,
yeah.
you know, there's a dozen different things you come up from a planning point of view.
So it's 9:00 right now, and I think what we should,
There's another.
did you need to say?
Right.
Karen?
No, I just had a question, because I'm kind of looking at attachment 2 and the kind of summary chart. You all discussed whether you wanted a full basement under the building. I apologize if I missed it, but I don't recall what you said about a partial basement.
Oh, we didn't, I guess.
We
I
didn't,
kinda
and I
felt
was
like
gonna
it
bring
was-
that up.
Yeah.
Like I was gonna make a decision on that and just say. The partial basement, meaning that we expand the crawl space to be a bit deeper, right?
It would be,
It-
if you
Correct.
did a new addition,
Oh, new addition, we
We
get
would do-
additional storage space in
Right.
there, but they could only be accessible to
Staff.
staff.
staff,
Correct.
right?
Which could be a situation like, I mean, Spooky Woods, for example, if we were to do something like that, potentially that could be a space that could house Spooky Woods stuff.
Yeah.
And then once a year, staff, maybe it's part of rental fee or something, but staff goes down and pulls that, pulls those things out. Barb's giving me a dirty look.
No, I'm not trying a dirty look. I'm just trying to follow, because I'm just pointing out that many of the items that you all have talked about, you still want to study are basically option 2 that Wiedemann put together. So that's part of what I was going through the checklist to see. As Phil noted, I think the partial basement was somewhat tied to the fact that a new rear addition would be built. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm clear on the direction I'm to give Wiedemann.
So I think I would like to propose that we soon table this discussion for now and go ahead.
Well, no, there's one more that was raised by several people, which was the stance floor issue, right?
Okay, so again, I was thinking of this was that this was kind of a given that we want there to be carpet space, but we also want there to be flat. We also want there to be hardwood floor space. I
think they had it
I was taking
included,
that for
yeah.
granted as like, yeah, we're gonna have some way.
It's almost like an equipment thing.
Yeah, I
the
mean, like I was just, I
end.
wasn't thinking that was part of the renovation, but I mean, like for acoustics, we probably do need carpeting of some sort.
Well, and they were gonna put things, they have prices in there just as placeholders to put acoustic treatment on the wall, which could help. You could also pin decorations into it, and they had some placeholder cost in for the ceiling. But then if you do both the wall and the ceiling, you can have a hardwood floor, but I think part of the issue was I think this floor is kind of like shot. It's
Right,
and so,
for itself, current, the one that we have right
yeah,
now.
so we need them, but point is, we probably need them to make sure that they've got it in the cost to put in a new kind of historically appropriate floor that could be used. Or
Yeah.
dancing if the carpet's pulled out.
Or if you do big enough addition in the back, put
Yeah,
it in there.
Yeah,
So did we make a decision though to keep the option of the partial basement? I didn't quite follow where we landed with that.
And maybe, I said I'd make that decision. Well, if we end up doing if we end up taking off the rear addition and putting an entirely new one, that's where the basement would, the new base or that partial basement would go. So if we end up keeping the addition that we have in the back and just sort of fixing it up.
and then there's no basement.
And it's only if we dig a new foundation for the rear addition that we would get that basement.
We have to
Right.
decide about whether we want that to be an item. I mean, I guess we said we want.
Right. I mean, to me, it's still
Yeah.
questionable whether that's worthwhile. I just want to state that for the record. I don't think a partial
Say
basement
that.
is worth the squeeze.
Yeah, personally, I think we could get the storage to kind of, it would be tight, but we could get it to fit back there programmatically. But what you could do potentially with that basement option is to ask them to sharpen their pencils on, that's basically option 2, like Barb was saying, sharpen their pencils on that, but then find out like what component cost it is to go from a crawl space to a
Crawl space.
basement. If they can tell you, hey, that's 15% of the cost, and we can know that it's, it's $180,000 to add it on, or whatever the number is, then we could decide, put a value to $180,000 or whatever that is. Because I don't think you want to take tables and chairs down there all the time, but like Spooky Woods another once or twice a year, things that could work. The other factor that came up with the basement, Phil, you probably remember this too, when we were talking about it, we were thinking like years ago, we were talking about putting all the mechanical equipment down there, but I'm not sure if you have as much need for that now with more electric heat pumps than you do with like a boiler. And the other big benefit was to be able to look at, with this one, was to be able to see the structure underneath, almost like having a car up on jacks, but it just may be too expensive to do it. But that's kind of where a lot of that started from.
Yeah, and I'm
Well,
not opposed to keeping it as an option. I just don't want to, at this point, commit that we'll definitely do it if we do the
Absolutely. I'm
addition.
definitely
I just
committing.
wanted to be clear about that.
So I propose taking these things back to Wiedemann and getting a very simple concept to
Well-
bring back and say, hey, are we getting closer to what looks good and what serves our needs?
I
And
get-
then, I mean,
But I thought we were gonna have them itemized, not a concept, right? Or at least.
no, I think.
No,
I
no.
think it's. Go ahead. Lisa, did you want to expand?
I just think
No.
numbers at this point is not going to be helpful, and it's not going to give us real information. So I would just work on exactly what you're saying, Mayor, which is go forward on a schematic where we can all say, yes, this is closer to what we want.
But it sounds like there's several options in this schematic. At the very least, we need to have options, right?
Right, so I think there's that. I think, yes, if we if we need to know the rear addition, like the various options of whether keep it exactly as is and we just fix the interior, like revamp the interior versus digging an entire new rear addition. I mean, I think there are elements of that that we need to consider, as well as the stage. I understand that maybe this is going to go the way of the commercial kitchen, a really great idea, but maybe not for us.
Or it's the wrong site.
Or just not say, but
so-
what I would propose, I mean, are you, okay,
Oh, just, this may sound corny, but we've done this on this kind of project before when I worked at firms is, but rather than really work on what the exact number is, which you really can't get to the exact number, like Lisa's saying, like, it's not like you're on the target and everything, it's got price information on it. It's much different with these kind of things. There's so many variables, but I've done projects before where you put like $1 symbol or $2 symbols. You kind of know, like you can look at things. It's almost like going to a Thai restaurant. You can see what's more spicy. You can kind of see like, hey, this, if it's appealing, realize it's a pretty hefty ticket. It doesn't really matter what the exact cost is, but just where it shakes. So.
I mean, I just have to say, I regret being fiscal conservative in the room. It's never been my goal. Like,
Yeah.
Which is that this survey was responded to by about 15% individuals of the town. Maybe if you're over 18 to respond and it was households, you could say double that. But that the other group, the 70% that didn't answer it, are probably not the ones who are involved in civic activities at all. And probably, I would dare say, we don't know what they think, but they're not the most participatory. We do know that.
yeah.
So that's 70% or so. So I think we're creeping back to option 2.
Yeah.
And I'm very wary of that because I think option 2 was named.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we are, I think it's just
Actually,
like,
you are.
I'd like to get a crack at coming up with another concept. And I'm very aware of the concerns. I don't not share them.
And I think it's helpful, Todd, that you're playing the fiscal conservative for the body. So
sure.
thank you.
We need a good guardrail. But I would still suggest like getting them to not go into great detail and do to like
Agreed.
one that has the bigger room, but
Agreed.
don't worry about the additions. They could just have a note on there to say, hey, maybe this is popped up into a taller ceiling or whatever. I don't think they need to draw very much.
So then, but then we need to talk about this. We need to, come back with this. I'm not sure how long it will take for us to.
If I can clarify something, so I'm looking at attachment 2, and I just want to be clear on what direction I'm to be giving Wiedemann. So when I look at kind of the little table format, I can bring it up if need be. It looks like with the exception of some question about whether you want to build the partial basement and nixing the arbor, much of what you have indicated that you have interest in is option 2. Am I mistaken?
So,
But the flow is wrong, Barb. That's the flow of the
Right.
people, it's not the right, that needs work.
Right. I'm just trying to make sure that the elements, though, sound a lot like that. Is that,
I would like you to.
I'm
So
sorry,
prior
not a page
to
number.
going to Wiedemann, I'd like to. I'll get with you and.
Okay.
We can.
And are we asking for a full-blown concept design, or you're doing something less? Because it's not going to be a couple $100, just to be clear.
And are we making sure we get options so that we can have choices? Because the implication at the beginning of this discussion was that there would be a certain set of options, and that, I mean, I understand we don't have prices, but we have ranges. We have, as was mentioned, orders of magnitude. We have, restaurant menu 1 to 5. I mean, we at least need to have a set of options that conveys that.
Okay.
And we would likely perhaps want to go back again to the public and see, because it does seem that it doesn't seem like we're fully respecting the idea that was conveyed to us, that people are just not that thrilled with spending a lot of money to do this.
I think we've gotten that. I mean,
Okay.
I think we have. So I'm not quite sure when we will be able to get something back from Wiedemann. So, this is, I don't want to say this is sort of on hold till further notice, but certainly not gonna be voting on this next month. Okay, so I will take it on that, but we need, I think we need to get this right, not just move quickly. Anything else that we need to,
Yeah,
okay,
so I would say with regard to the basement, we would at least I would think we would want to look into having at least some of the basement, because if we can put some of the mechanicals downstairs, that frees up room upstairs. So,
okay, you guys mind if we move on to the next item? Is that okay? The time is 9:22. Town Manager Matthews, Wayne Street.
Sure. I think everyone likely remembers the history of this. Back in March, you authorized execution of a contract with the transportation engineering firm of Grove Slade. One of the 4 tasks that we contracted with the firm for was to do an assessment of the requested installation of a speed bumper hump on Weymouth Street. Just to recap their presentation from July, basically, based on the observed percentile speed, that a speed bump would not be warranted at this location based on that standard. They did note that the trips on the roadway were generally consistent with the number of trips expected. However, there were some kind of additional unrelated traffic with volumes of 10 to 20% above the expected trip generation. What Grove Slade recommended as a first step that you consider was installing essentially a stop sign be added to the northbound approach of Weymouth at Oxford. Basically, there are some existing stop signs at the location. So that was their recommended first step. 3 months following the proposed installation of the additional stop control, then basically go back and get feedback and see where you wanted to go from here.
Barb, what about the signatures of the petition that everybody on Weymouth signed?
Right, so there were.
That
number of
wants a speed
residents- Right, there are a number of residents who and repeated, I sent or emailed us in the last few days, repeated their
Right.
support and said, we see that the engineering firm, traffic engineering firm said that it's not necessarily warranted from a data perspective. We hope that you'll still do it. So we as a council are not obligated to go with,
No, of course not.
do it. So the question is, do we want to proceed with doing a speed bump on Weymouth? And if so, do we also want a stop sign? And so what's the sense? Lisa, you have been a big proponent of
I think
putting
she,
this stop sign. Why don't you?
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
still here. I got to get on a plane in a couple minutes, but I would propose a vote to proceed with a speed bump or a speed hump on the top of the Weymouth, and maybe combine it with the work that needs to be done on the parking lot of the nursery school, just from a cost standpoint to get a better price. But I know
also-
that, yeah, so that would be my vote.
But the idea being, Phil, that if we were to say yes, it's not like we could put in a speed hump or speed bump tomorrow. It'd be better to bundle it with other work being done so that it would be.
Right.
Right, but isn't paving for that street already planned in FY24? Couldn't we agree
Yes.
to include it in that bundle?
So how about let's go with conceptually, how do y'all feel about putting in a speed bump? This is, as Barb mentioned, this is not something that the data shows is required. How does that affect or does it not affect? Do you want a speed bump or no? Lisa is saying yes.
well, my question
Please,
would
yes.
be, if we put in the speed bump and it's not recommended, is there any liability that the town could possibly have, but if somebody got into an accident? I mean, John,
yeah, I'm not a lawyer, but I didn't get the sense from Grove Slade's presentation that it would create liability. I think they certainly had a very strong opinion on where any speed bump or hump should go from a safety standpoint. So I think if we ignored that advice, there probably is some liability because you have to be very clear where you're putting it from a.
Specify, if you proceed with this, this is where it should go.
yeah.
Yeah, they gave
we
a
did-
specific
yes.
dimension and a specific location.
And explain why it would be unwise to put it at a different location where it would be less safe.
So Phil, how do you feel about putting in a speed bump?
I'm fine with putting a speed bump. I guess we could try, the other thing was there's a proposal to put a temporary one in, which those things are kind of miserable, but we can install them ourselves.
I mean, if we were to need to wait, if we want to proceed and we're going to need to wait 6 or 8 months or whatever for,
Yeah.
Aren't, aren't we, are,
These are what some of the temporary ones look like.
not pretty, but.
They're not pretty, and if we were to get snow and we hit one of those with a plow, it'll be toast, just in the interest of full disclosure. These don't hold up well against a plow, but that is certainly something, if you wanted to do something temporarily, we could.
could we get a sense, Barb, of timing? Because we are right now in the midst of FY24. We're already in the beginning, the second quarter. So if we're planning paving on that street in FY24, when is that likely to happen month-wise?
There's not paving planned for that street. There are, I believe what someone was referring to, but there is paving planned on some other streets, and certainly this would be a logical thing to be combined with that. If you try to get a contractor out here strictly to do one speed hump, you're probably looking at 2 to 3 times the cost just from a mobilization standpoint.
Thank you,
But
Lisa.
what is the timing of that other paving?
It would be bid out. It's planned to be done in FY24, so probably the bids will be issued early 2024 with work starting like April, May. So the work would be done before the end of the fiscal year.
Just the question of what the liabilities of the speed bump, I mean, besides sort of legal liability, it just seems like it would slow traffic, which might be unnecessary. I mean,
Yeah, they're intended to, I mean, I worked in Tacoma Park, as many of you know, for many years, and it is a town of speed bumps and humps everywhere. Certainly I think for those who are supportive of them, they are a traffic calming device. They do slow cars and other vehicles down. There is also a school of thought of some people who don't like them because they also slow emergency vehicles down. But generally the profile, there are different profiles of speed bumps and humps. This would probably be a hump rather than a bump. And essentially you try to design them so they're not like curbs. I mean, you have gone through some places, you probably have run into them where they're practically like curbs. The profile that Grove Slade gave is obviously, intended to slow cars down, but not be overly problematic with cars bottoming out or slowing down emergency vehicles unduly.
Well, this is
What
like
about-
Montgomery County standard speed bump is what they're recommending.
Right.
So what about the concept? So Phil, you support the concept. Steve, what do you think?
Support it too. I feel like
Okay.
it's not a volume issue. It's a kind of a rudeness issue.
Okay.
People, going too fast.
Sure, I support it.
Jeremy?
Strongly.
Okay, so we are going to put in a speed bump. The question is, do we want to? I don't want to assume that we want to wait until April or May and bundle it with this, but.
I would argue that given how long it took us just to get the slide procured, that if we bundle this with the current planned paving, that's a pretty expeditious schedule. I don't see the point of taking up time and resources to do the temporary, which actually possibly could slow the construction down because you'd have to disassemble it at just the right time.
Well, but the temporary is just kind of, you just pick it up, right? I mean,
Right, I mean, it's basically screwed or nailed into the,
Yeah.
and
And the neighbors may not care for the noise that it might produce, the temporary one.
So you oppose putting in a temporary?
I do.
Okay,
I would put it in just to see if it even works.
but it's not like a true test of what would.
Oh,
But you
Yeah.
still gotta slow down.
Okay.
you'll slow down.
I'd have to look it up. It depends. It would be, let me see if I can find it. I'd have to basically add up the component parts because you buy them in sections. There's a middle section and there's end kits, and I apologize, I have not done that. It would be less than $1,000.
Less than 1,000, right?
Right.
Less than 1,000.
I think to put it in perspective, though, I think if you do the actual asphalt speed hump, you're probably looking as part of a paving job of $2,500 or something like that. So I think it just depends whether you want to try it or not.
I feel like it could wait till spring, but it is.
If you can, sure.
Wait for spring,
Wait till spring.
but how do you feel about the concept? Oh, yeah, you said.
I support the concept. I'm neutral about waiting. I don't have enough information, but maybe if the residents want it, maybe they should get the temporary one. I don't know. I mean,
If it's not-
I didn't get any, the residents commented, asked for a speed bump or hump, but I didn't get the sense that they were commenting on temporary versus,
No, they
I think.
No,
But they know this.
Well, they will now.
sorry.
Okay, all right.
Just trying to be helpful there.
So we're gonna bundle that. So we're gonna go, well, this isn't a resolution, this isn't anything, so we don't need to vote on this, right? We got the
No,
formal approval.
my understanding is we're moving forward with the profile recommended by Grove Slade, and we're doing it as part of the paving work in FY 2024.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Mayor, I would like to request, and I'd be happy to work with you on this, that we send some letters under your signature to the various GPS purveyors about noting that this is Garrett Park, not Kensington, when you type in
Oh, yeah,
right, and
Yes.
that Weymouth is not a through street. That was another recommendation that some of the neighbors made. It's
In
a
addition to
separate.
Changing the name of the street. That's another
Yes, I'm not in favor of changing the name of the street, but I do think it couldn't hurt us to reach out to the mapping companies
I would be
about,
delightful to sign my name to anything you want to draft.
okay, I'll be happy
Yeah.
to work on that one. Thank you.
I mean, I'll contribute if you need help. All right. Excellent. The time is 9:34. Councilmember Praskowski, you wanted to talk with us a concept about capital budget and long range planning.
Talk about long range planning, but I'm going to keep it short. Short range. And I meant to do this in May, but I think we had a packed agenda then, so we cut it out just to save some time. But really, the concept is like I feel like I've been working on trying to move the ball on this, like move this rock up the hill on this project here in Town Hall for 7-8 years. It's just really hard to do things in this town. I think it would be helpful if we could consider a different way of doing budgeting. Maybe we can try to figure out instead of the way we have it now, it's all little categories where there's a little savings account for a lot of different kind of ideas for the future. And usually it's not enough money to cover any of them. So we end up having to try to figure out what's it going to cost and how we're going to shift money, how are we going to make it doable. I feel like we could almost like flip that on its head and do it more in a long range capital plan where we might be able to say, hey, we know we want to do something with Town Hall. We think it's going to be plus or minus 1.5 million, and then try to figure out, hey, we can realistically figure out what all that project is, and it's 1.5 million, and do it in a certain year. It could be the same thing with a lot of other things, like the parking lot over by the train station or Cambria Park. We could figure out that, those are X and Y amount of dollars, and then try to figure out where, if they're higher priority, put them in a certain year as well. And then that way we'd be able to kind of use a lot more of our capital money. It may expend itself down further, but I think if we get rid of the judicious on our operating budget, we'd be able to do like the maximum contribution to the capital each year. I think that could help it build that back up again really quickly.
It also gives that concept of like, hey, we're working almost not bake sale. We're not going to do bake sales, please.
Yeah.
Nobody think I'm saying that, but we have a project that we're working toward. Hey, we need a new, we want a new jungle gym, on Joanna's roof. Let's all work toward that. It gives us a thing to be working toward. So I like that. Is that something that we can, I think that works really well as part of the retreat that we're going to have in a couple of weeks.
For sure. And that's what I was thinking that we're going to be having like the mid-year. We shouldn't change anything with the mid-year, but just something to throw out there for the next fiscal year. Maybe if there's some alternate format we could do to kind of do that longer range planning. Because it is just like you're saying, Joanna, where you might have, if you have a clear idea of what is planned for when, and then, it's easy for a lot of people to say, oh, you can get grants for that, but then everybody walks away. If there is something, we know what it is and we know what that funding gap is, then we need $500,000 in grants or $50,000, then might have something more productive for people to have volunteer energy in town to do things versus right now, I think we end up with so much churn on just random questions and, kind of doubt on every project. It seems like every project kind of comes up and it gets kind of people tire of it really quickly, just with all the churn of misinformation. I think it would be better if we had something like that and we'd be able to have like project information sheets where like a lot of things that we already know to be true could be on there. So we don't have people making the same wrong statement again. We could point and say, well, that's still true. It's still number 7, but that would help us, I think, to kind of like get those points of progress kind of marked.
I think that's a great thing for us to include in our in the retreat is sort of if we think holistically about the entire town, when are we putting in the subway? What year? Where on our priority list? And
Slow,
and how do we start budgeting for that? But that way we can sort of name all the things, just think, okay, thinking around all the different places in town, what needs to be done? And then try to put the timeline for that stuff. Yeah.
And is there a certain carryover each year, some percentage of, conversion of operating expenses to capital
Yes.
budget? Do you know?
Well, they're separate. Yeah, they're separate budget, and usually it seems like we have a little bit extra comes each year. Some people would say it's a lot of money, but it's really hard to predict exactly what your operating budget will be. But it's kind of the way a lot of these things happen outside of this government. You kind of figure out what you're going to be able to contribute each year, and then see when you can build up to do something meaningful, and then build up again.
But we could
to do it
plan,
later.
but there's an element that we could plan in the budgeting process and say, this is the capital pot we want to put it toward for the thing that we're doing next. And, oh, we've got a carryover. There's a bonus. Hey, you know what? We definitely want to speed up X, Y, Z, and let's put it that concept.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the
Yeah.
concept of making it sort of action driven as opposed to just dribs and drabs of money going into separate capital pot.
You have a concerted, say the, town hall restoration fund or whatever.
Or
Well, we
whatever's
already have
next,
that.
What's next? Sorry.
whatever's next, next in the,
Yeah.
and if we know that, that 8 years from now, the technology will be up there for all electric vehicles, and we want to change our fleet to have all electric. I don't know, but things like that. I want the electric vehicles more than I want the subway. Just, okay. So are you?
But just the one-
Shut off your conversation.
No, but I think it's great. It wasn't really meant to be kind of a preview for taking that further at the retreat, and I think in the next budget cycle. But I think one of the things that would help too is I think what happens in a lot of projects in this town is people get so used to things as they are, and it really it kind of like stunts the process. There are a lot of things in this town that have kind of changed from what they were originally designed at, and there may be some value in putting some of it back. And then, so if you start really thinking about like what it could be, even if you can't afford it yet, that helps you to kind of find out like how much value is there into putting, something.
So that's part of a mission statement-ish, like if we value returning things to how they were originally. Kate was talking about this, of using Thrive 2050 as a lens for looking at, do you remember what I was talking about, Jerry Lee? Like sorry. I think it's a great idea.
We'll
So-
figure out how to work
What
it.
would it take to sort of operationalize that, to get that into practice?
I think in terms of the capital budget, we've had some discussion about this during my tenure. A line item you all recently used, basically it was just sitting there. So I don't think it would be that difficult to probably, kind of look ahead a number of years and basically kind of have project narratives talking about what's envisioned.
And are we planning ahead now? Like if this is a direction that we want to try to pursue for FY25, are we on target now that we could sort of put the infrastructure in place so that we can have this be not a guiding force, but kind of a principle to consider when we start the next budget cycle?
I think probably, I think what I don't know until you all have a budget work session is what your priorities are for, besides the obvious, standard replacement of equipment or paving or something like that, where we have done some longer term, looking ahead. So some of that's going to be driven by you all and when you provide that direction.
Right. Okay. I think we can start that thinking at the retreat.
It was just conceptual because Barb has pointed out a couple times, like it may be done one way in public, finance, but like, or private finance, but like maybe had to be different for the way things are done with government. So you'd have to follow certain accounting rules. So
Yeah.
it's really just meant to be a concept. Like,
Yeah, but I think the idea of your idea, Stephen, of looking out and being able to plan a little bit better and also communicate to our residents sort of what's coming down the pike, I think is a very good idea.
Bill, you look kind of dissatisfied.
No, I'm just thinking,
Thank
no,
you.
I'm kind of like thinking how much different is it than what we do now, except we're not really doing a lot of outreach or super defining of things. But it's there.
I think what I've typically seen, you know, and I think the further out you go, the more speculative it becomes. So I've worked in cities that had 10-year capital improvement plans. I would say 5 years is probably a more typical timeframe. But yeah, we just sort of would take the same dollars, but show how they're envisioned to be spent. And
Yeah,
um,
I mean.
so
fine.
I think paving's probably the one that would probably be the easiest to do at this point because
Sure.
we've already had a longer term study done.
All right, we'll move on. Time is 9:43, and we're going to talk about reallocating ARPA funds. This is something that we have discussed several times, and I don't want to ignore what Chris Keller said about wanting us to hold off on reallocating ARPA funds until we do the budget next spring for FY 2025.
Mayor, if I may, I'm going to jump in here. So essentially, from an accounting standpoint, you have to book your expenditures to when they're incurred. So some of these projects are charging ahead. The other thing I would just add is I have to submit a report by April 30th to the Treasury Department showing what we've charged to ARPA. So I think between just our own accounting rules of being able to show when projects are booked and where they're booked to, I also have to file something with the federal government. So
I wanted to just bring back up what you had said, because I didn't want to just say, no, you're wrong, and so you didn't respond.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so I want to acknowledge, I'm sorry, Chris, there you. So I wanted to acknowledge what you said about wanting to push that, purpose being to not lose momentum. But that's not a feasible thing, you know.
No.
There's not really a reason, there's not a financial reason. Maybe there's a mental reason to put it off, or like a psychological reason to say, oh, we want to make sure that we're charging forward with ARPA for town hall. But I don't think that's the fiscally prudent thing to do. I think, as Barb said, if we were to push it off to 2025, then that would only give us 6 months to spend all those funds. If we would only be able to charge those things, you know, those things that incurred during those 6 months.
So I do have a question though about that timing, because if we don't do this until the mid-year budget adjustment in December, would that you currently have on the list of things, the truck, for example, that we just authorized tonight, would that still work for that particular purchase? I know that's a small one. And
No. Yeah, I mean, at this point, we haven't ordered it, so I think the question becomes when it comes in. You know, I think if you indicate tonight that you're comfortable with charging, I'm going to use the truck as the most obvious example, to ARPA funds, we can book it we'd have to create an account. Because right now there's only 2 accounts under ARPA, which are town hall and the town office renovation. You know, so we could certainly do a budget adjustment prior to mid-year if you'd like, for those items. There's certainly a number of capital projects that just simply aren't known, however.
So our accounts are just for our notation, right? I mean, like, we say that it's
They're for our financial tracking purposes, right?
but we are not legally bound to use them for that.
No, at some point, if you make a decision, whenever you make a decision, if you want to use the funds for a different project, then basically what our accountant would do is we would create new accounts. We would add accounts under that ARPA capital budget to account for those projects. So you'd probably have an ARPA equipment if we were doing the truck. You'd have an ARPA. I mean, we can figure out how to group them. That's sort of an artificial thing that's for our purposes.
So it's
Yeah.
really, the purpose of the budget amendment is in order to refund that ARPA. It is that reallocation. So we
Right.
can spend the money, like there's no, like we can buy the truck
Or paint pen.
or paint Penn Place prior to doing a budget amendment.
As long as there is, I'd be comfortable doing that. Obviously, the budget amendment process is just the formal way of recognizing that.
Right. So,
But when the bill comes in, I need to book it someplace.
right. So what we wouldn't be able to do without the amendment would be to move the funds from the, like from the equipment account to the town hall capital account, right? Like we would not be able to make that. So we
Yeah.
would be, I don't know that it requires a lot of trusting.
You couldn't do it now, or you would have to hold it until the
So
FY 25.
We can use, no, we
No.
can use the money now. We can use our
Yeah.
funds to buy the truck, to paint Penn Place. We need to do an amendment in order to then take the funds that were already budgeted for equipment for the truck. We need to do an amendment to move those funds to the capital account specifically for town hall. So we can't make it budget neutral. So in other words, if they go and buy it tomorrow, the next month, it's gonna look like we spent money like we spent ARPA funds and that we have now less money for town hall. It'll look like that because we will not have done the amendment to replenish. So the intent is that we have 5 things or whatever that are already funded. We want to move that money to town hall, specifically to town hall. And it's a shell game using the ARPA funds for those other items, but we can't complete that loop. We can't complete that shell.
I'm not understand, why can't we complete it? Why can't we move it to the
Because-
other?
Because that's the budget amendment. We need
That's
to-
the budget amendment process. So there's really there's a couple of things depending on which projects you want to charge to ARPA. So there's a couple of different actions. One is to reduce the current appropriation to the town hall renovation under ARPA. And we can talk about which projects you're comfortable doing that and create new sub-accounts under the ARPA for those items. What the mayor is referring to, for example, is I'm going to use paving as an example. What we assume the FY 2024 paving minus the speed bump, so there might be a slight adjustment there, was $120,000. So for that item, for example, there's really 3 different ways to charge it. One is to use highway user funds. One is to use the money you've already appropriated in the capital budget. And the third is ARPA. But I think what Joanna, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is if we decide to charge the paving to ARPA, the FY 2024 paving, obviously we would reduce what's currently for ARPA for town hall by $120,000, but then we would move $120,000 from the road account to the town hall account.
But
Does
what
that make
we
sense?
do right now, we can't do today is close that. We can't, without the amendments, without doing the amendment, we can't do it all at the same time.
Yeah,
We cannot do an amendment.
you don't have to do an amendment, but you could basically, in order to do the amendment, I sort of need at least guidance on what you're comfortable doing with these projects
So
and
we've
where they get
already said-
charged.
We've already said that we are comfortable using ARPA funds for non-town hall things that are already funded. Okay, got $120,000 already set aside to do paving. Okay, we've already budgeted that money. The money is already set aside. We have to do it over the course of a few months because of the amendment process requires a holdover of a month. But we don't want to not do a thing. We don't want to not do paving. We don't want to not purchase the truck just because we have to wait 2 months to do the amendment to move the money around.
So you're looking for more of a concurrence that we would introduce an amendment and then a following month
Yes.
approve it, and Barb would
It's a
have
commitment-
all the
it's a
numbers on
commitment
it.
to make sure that this remains neutral.
So you want us to do an amendment at the next meeting? You want us to
I
commit
can-
to
I
that?
can certainly do an amendment. I mean, I think what we have are, just to be clear, so I think paving's a pretty good number. That came from our engineer. The truck, we already know. I think last meeting I mentioned that we had not included the federal funding addendum as part of the bid for the Penn Place painting, I had asked the, potential contractor to sign it. He did. So that opens up that opportunity. So what I would say is paving, I think we have a pretty good number for. The truck, obviously we do. We have a quote. And, but for the carpentry work, we know kind of roughly what Penn Place is going to cost. The unknowns are things like the pool wall. We had a number that's in the budget. I think it will likely be more than that because of certain decisions or discussions that you all have had. I have an estimate for the Waverly sidewalk. Obviously, that did not include lighting, and we haven't picked a lighting fixture, so I can't run numbers for everything.
But we've already.
They're funded projects.
So I did have a question for the items that can be paid for out of highway user fees.
Mhm.
What would be, is it, that seems concerning to me that we would use the ARPA for those, since those are.
User funds, we have 10 years to use them.
Right.
And so.
Okay, so we have a longer.
And it's not that much money.
Do we
Not
have any
dangerous
that are
expire.
expiring anytime soon?
No, as I've stated before, I was not the person who filed the prior reports. I think we probably, between safe routes to school and some other things that the town share of that project, qualified. We had sidewalk work in FY 2022, which is what I reported we used the funds for. We had no eligible projects in FY 2023, which is why that funding has been reserved. So it shows up in the reserve summary. As Joanna mentioned, you do have 10 years to use highway user funds. There's a report I have to file with the state every year. And the reason I suggested that you formally restrict the funds is that's what the state is looking for, that you've actually taken those funds, set them aside, and have not used them on something that's inappropriate. So
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
I guess what I would prefer is to not dictate what items we are using these ARPA funds for, but rather just saying that we will except to require that they only be used for other budgeted items so that we can maintain this budget neutrality. And I'm looking for the highway user funds, Barb. Is that 3.1, the state?
Oh, no, it's a fairly nominal amount of money. Let me just.
Okay, but there's no risk that that these are gonna expire.
No, no.
Okay.
I think, and the other thing I would just mention, just in casual conversation, probably a 2-minute conversation with Greg Wiedemann at some point, is I asked him, his opinion on how long it would take to get through, and obviously a lot of this is contingent on when you all make a decision on what you want to include, but from start to finish to actually start detailed design work with whatever architect you choose to use is likely 9 to 12 months. So realistically, with the ARPA funds, depending on how quickly you all kind of coalesce around to what you want to do, you don't have to use the funds by December 31st, 2024. The funds have to be obligated, meaning you have a signed contract. I think it's very feasible. You could get through the detailed design and preparation of permitting drawings by, very easily, depending on your decision-making process, by December 31st, 2024 of having a contract signed. It is highly unlikely, and we've had this discussion before, that you will actually have a construction contract signed. And so I think that's part of the thinking of, trying to use making sure that we're getting the funds spent on projects that you had already planned to do anyway. And as Joanna said, kind of swapping out the funds.
So this is just, I think there's a strong commitment. I'm very unequivocal, strong commitment to replenish anything we use for town hall that we would otherwise used.
Right, so those accounts would be moved to the town hall. capital
Correct,
account
they'd be
During
reduced.
the mid-year budget
Correct.
adjustments.
Yes.
That would be
Yeah,
the direction
right.
we're giving Barb.
So I just want to make sure you all are comfortable with us spending down ARPA funds as we can, because we have expenses and these are for already budgeted things. And that then at the mid-year, we will make sure that we are reallocating so that we're truly showing the commitment to town hall by putting an equivalent amount.
It would be good to use those monies eventually for town hall, right? I mean, that's
Well, okay, so, but
indirect.
indirect, yes,
Yes.
absolutely, that is 100% the commitment.
Right.
We committed, we said we wanted $700,000, whatever, of ARPA funds to go to town hall.
Okay.
That doesn't
Makes
change.
sense.
It just means
Fidget.
we fidget. That's
Yeah.
really all it is. It's just.
Chelsea. Yeah.
It's-
Counting tricks.
No, they're not. I mean, I was-
Okay, so the person who basically is the treasurer, hearing things like shell game and things starting to make me twitch over here. I know.
Just kidding.
No, I don't know. And yet, Joanna, if I may, I mean, I think the other thing is if it would make everyone more comfortable, it's certainly not that difficult to put together a budget amendment if that's something that you want to go ahead and introduce next month. That's
I mean, do we have to
fine.
identify with that amendment where we're gonna, like, where we're putting those funds? But we would have to identify the projects that we would spend it on.
Correct. I mean, I think I gave you a list of the 6 capital projects that that we are expecting to get done in FY 2024 anyway.
Well,
I mean,
Sure.
I'm comfortable, well, okay, I don't have a vote. So it doesn't matter.
no, I was just gonna ask something to make it easier, because I know Barb's mentioned this before. Would it be easier to just basically move the ARPA funds to line 10 personnel and then move that line over? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think that's possible. And certainly I know some of the smaller municipalities who probably aren't doing as much in capital as we are doing that. You know, I would say, and I don't know if I can explain it, it's more kind of a gut comfort feeling of using the ARPA funds for capital projects if possible. You know, so Joanna, you had texted me before the meeting and asked about just kind of dollar amounts. So obviously the exterior painting of Penn Place, you know, we've awarded a contract. The unknown is the carpentry work. But the contract award for that was $89,600.
Okay.
The replacement pickup truck, which you awarded earlier, I'm just going to round, was 50,146.
Plus the plow.
And plus there'll be a plow, which is roughly $5,000. Waverly is very much a wild card of how much we would move. Originally, Jason Azar had given me a cost estimate of $40,000 to $50,000. I sent that estimate to you all, I think back in August, maybe. That did not include the lighting. So that's the unknown.
Right, so let's say that's 65.
Yeah, Jason sent me some information. We had a conversation a couple weeks ago, so I haven't had a chance to really look at it. I'm hoping the lighting won't be that much, but obviously the number of lights in the fixture is going to drive the cost. The community center work was, and this is including some design fees. So we could probably journal entry those to ARPA that we've already spent, was estimated at 75,000. That includes design. The original figure that I had used for the budget for the wall repair near the pool, including design, was 41,400. Once again, there's been some discussion about a different way of approaching that project, which would basically be kind of maintaining the historic wall and then constructing another wall behind it. So that number, I believe, is likely to go up.
So let's say 45, just for kicks.
It's going to be a lot more than 45 if it was already at 41.4 with just doing a basic wall,
50.
Okay.
easily 50.
We have to
I-
get up to 800.
Well, and here's the thing, and then street repaving was 120. So without any of the adjustments, some of you just, you know, shouted out, this was roughly about $426,000. The other thing I'll just remind you though is, as I said, you can very easily use the balance of the funds for a design. You know, we're going to have to do detailed drawings for town hall. There's going to have to be a permit set drawn, depending on
The thing is, though,
the funds start.
to express this commitment to
Right.
replenishing all the funds that they're
Right.
currently psychologically allocated for town hall.
Correct.
Let's say,
Maybe we should vote on it.
Well, you will be through the budget amendment process. So, I mean, I think if by consensus you're comfortable like I say, I can go back to Jason Azar on some of these things that are unknown, like Waverly. I think it's going to be hard for Jason Azar even to give us a number until you all talk about the lighting and how much, but we can just guesstimate.
But are you guys, I mean, are you okay with just sort of, as long as we are doing things that are previously budgeted? Do you guys care what they are? I mean, we're spending the money, and we're replenishing. So I guess I'm saying, I guess I'm saying, Barbara, I just don't, except for the purpose of the amendment, in which case we need to identify where we're putting the money.
Mhm.
Right, and we'll be documenting it in December.
Exactly.
And we probably should revisit this every quarter as we
Yeah,
move along to see how we're doing with, you know, the design costs, et cetera.
Do we need to introduce the amendment next month, or can it wait, or do you want to, I don't want to,
Yeah.
next month introduce so that adopt in December, or wait until we introduce the mid-year budget?
I'll double check with Mary. I have a call with her tomorrow at 2:00 on a different topic anyway, but bills are going to start coming in for certain things. So what you will see, which may be alarming to some, is if we're making the decision to charge it to ARPA, what you will see then is a zero appropriation in a line item, say for equipment, and you'll see the cost of the truck booked there.
It will look alarming. Some people might feel alarmed by it.
Right, and we can put a footnote or something on the report. I mean, I think other than that, you can just wait to mid-year. But I do want to make it clear that at least there's a consensus, that's what we're doing.
Would it
So
help
Barb,
Mary
you
a-
did mention, I'm sorry, Stephen.
Would it help Mary a lot if we did do it ahead of the mid-year or?
I don't know that she's really going to have an opinion, but I mean, it's certainly easy enough to do. I mean, it's not going to be that hard. I'm basically just subtracting and adding and netting something out to zero, basically.
Barb, question. So you did mention earlier possibly providing the amendment in November. I assume you mean just this.
Just this item, not
mid-year.
full mid-year. Yeah, I mean, truthfully, I would probably prefer to have a full 6 months before we introduce mid-year. So I was just talking just these specific items.
I mean, it would be nice, I think, if we
Yeah.
could at least have the amendment in November rather than waiting, just to make sure we have our
Okay.
T's
Mhm.
crossed.
So can we do that? Let's do that. Let's
Okay.
introduce it next month so that we can show that we really are committed and we're demonstrating that we're moving that. Okay, I want to do really quick the town update. The only one I know of is archives. And Lisa is on her way to Barcelona or someplace. You have one? Do you want to go first?
It's okay.
Okay, so let's see, Archives Committee met last week and they talked about the Chevy House tour coming up in the spring. And doing a collection of some new oral histories. They're looking for volunteers or committee members have volunteered to conduct more oral histories. There were year-to-date research requests. We've had 33 research requests. So far in October, it's been pretty quiet. It's a new exhibit on the story of Garrett Park. Well, always that. Added a new exhibit on the story of Garrett Park to the cabinet. I don't know what that means. I'm sorry.
In the post office,
Yeah.
there is that glass cabinet that
Right.
has the rotating monthly.
But it's always about Garrett Park.
True, this is a little more holistic with the broad origins.
All right. Let's see, recently came across an interesting find on a bookcase in the town office where books by local authors are located. It's a Bible that a 1940s Sunday school class presented to the St. James Chapel. She's added that Bible to the St. James Chapel collection in the archives. So she will be in the archives for the next 2 Fridays. So if anybody needs anything. And Jerry, you had an update?
Just very quickly, since it didn't make it to the Bugle, on November 5th, that's a Sunday, at 1 p.m., there will be a tree walk sponsored by the Arboretum Committee. The arborist will spend a few hours walking people around town and giving background, history, care, and looking towards the future for our wonderful collection of trees.
Great. Anything else? All right. Time is.
What time is that again? I'm sorry.
1 p.m.,
Wow.
November 5th. All are welcome. All ages are welcome.
But no squirrels. The time is 10:06 and we are adjourned.